I'm calling back this meeting to order of the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Education. Item 4.1, tonight's broadcast statement, which will be read by our student board member, Halbo.
This meeting of the Sacramento City School Board is being recorded in its entirety and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air Sunday, October 21st at 6 p.m. and Monday, October 22nd at noon, and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. We welcome members of the audience to address the board. Please complete a speaker form located in the back of the community room and give them to our communications representative along with any handouts you may have for the board prior to the conclusion of the item's presentation. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please limit comments during public comment to items that are not on the agenda. If you do comment on an item that is on the agenda, we will ask that you please defer your comments until your item comes up on the agenda. Please also turn off your cell phones or place them on silent or vibrate.
Thank you, Student Board Member Halbo. Item 4.2, the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight's Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Ellie Enriquez, a sophomore at Rosemont High School. And Eliana, we have our flag over here. I hope you can see it. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Eliana, if you can please stay up here. Tonight's student presentation will be presented by Board Member Pritchett, the area representative for Rosemont High School. And by the way, Principal Vigil, thank you so much for welcoming us to your home.
Good evening. We are proud to introduce Ellie Enriquez as our Stellar Student of the Month. Ellie represents the ideal of a well-rounded student, someone who prioritizes academic achievement but also participates in co-curricular activities that add dimension to her high school experience. You could say that football is in Ellie's blood. She has loved the game as far back as she can remember and began playing flag football when she was only 6 years old. Her father played a quarterback at CSUS and served as an assistant football coach for Rosemont High School for the last 12 years. Ellie's older brother, Anthony, played quarterback at Rosemont and holds the record for the single-season passing yards and touchdowns. And her other brother, Buddy, also played quarterback for Rosemont and holds the record for career passing yards and touchdown. Ellie is currently the quarterback for our JV team and has led our team to a 6-0 record for the season. You can give her a round of applause, it's okay. Ellie has thrown 9 touchdown passes and also caught a touchdown pass. In addition to her outstanding and extremely rare achievements on the football field, Ellie maintains a 4.0 grade point average. And she deserves another applause. She is a focused, disciplined student who serves as a role model for her peers. She is also an accomplished member of the Rosemont softball team and will play basketball this year for the first time. We could not be more proud of this amazing student. And I just want to say I've known Ellie for a long time. In fact, my son played football with your brothers, and I believe your father coached my son. I'm so proud of the young woman that you have become. You should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you.
I'm going to come down. Hold on to stay.
Eliana, while Board Member Pritchett makes her way down to you, do you want to say a few words?
I would just like to thank my parents for always pushing me and always being there for me, and my friends and family and everyone who's close to me always telling me how I should always keep pushing through everything and being positive.
Wonderful. That's a great message. Item 5.0, announcement of action taken in closed session.
None, Madam President.
Item 6.0, agenda adoption. So moved. Do we have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Student preferential vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 7.0, public comment. Mr. Barrios, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have two public comments. Nancy Hosino, followed by Cecile Nunley.
Each of our public commenters have 2 minutes. We will be using our phone with a timer that will let you know when your 2 minutes are over.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Nancy Hosino, and I am the mother of 3 wonderful children at Language Academy of Sacramento. And we are here, and I say we because I am here today representing the voice of 80 families in our school, and that are asking approval for a parent engagement project called Parent Club. Parent Club is a monthly event. We're asking to meet once a month in our school. Why are we asking for this? Because we noticed that parent engagement is low. Just last month, we also were told by the preliminary CASP scores in math that they are also low. And as parents, we understand that school is not solely responsible for academic achievement. We know that as parents, they're our children, and we know that we can help. And we know that as parents, we can bring the best out of our children. I mean, we live with them. And we just need to learn how. And we have presented this proposal to administration. We have presented it to parent council. And last but not least, we presented it to the governing board of our school, as we are an independent charter. According to the California Department of Education, the right protocol to follow, because we did not get approval. So the next protocol is to reach out to our authorizing entity, that is Sacramento City, and that's why I'm here. And with the parents of Language Academy are asking for your support and for your intervention into getting Parent Club approved. With your permission, I would like to provide you with a copy of the Parent Club proposal after my presentation. I have been a parent of Language Academy since 2003, and I know that we parents can help with those scores, whether they're math, whether they're reading, whether they're behavior, whatever they are, I am confident that we can if we are given the opportunity to do so. My contact information is in my report, and I am asking for follow-up. Thank you for your time.
If we can have our board special assistant, Nathaniel Brown, share my contact information. Many of my families in Oak Park also attend the Language Academy. I'd love to sit down and have a meeting to discuss the parent engagement proposal.
Well, good evening, Board and Superintendent Aguilar. It's great to be here. This is my time for my usual item that I'm going to bring up, which is the African American suspension rates. I would like, and I am making a request, that we make this a standing agenda item, and that we in particular give details as far as the rates for each month by school site, if at all possible. I will do that repeatedly until we start seeing some action on that, because it is so important that this remain in the forefront of the school district. So I respectfully submit my request again.
Thank you, Cecile. And I do want to note that we have included as item 11.2 a monthly suspension report, and we'll be doing that moving forward in all board meetings. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.0, public hearings. Item 8.1, public hearing on the material revision of the charter petition for Success Skills Incorporated, Norcal Trade and Tech.
Good evening, Board, President Ryan, esteemed board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. I'm Jack Kramer, Director of Innovative Schools and Charter Oversight. Tonight, I will be facilitating the public hearing on the material revision of the charter petition for Norcal Trade and Tech. The contents for tonight's presentation is an overview of the charter school, various matters regarding material revisions, and finally, we will conclude with next steps. And I've noticed Mr. Mike Brunell, President of Norcal Trade, he's joined me to my left. We have the overview of the charter school, and this is information that has been presented before. What I would like to focus on is the middle area, locations currently in use by Norcal Trade, and it is the 3821 41st Avenue, 10620 Shira, as well as 2401 district-owned property on Florin. The material revision proposed by the charter is for the 10620 Shira Avenue. Regarding their material revision request, the charter school is seeking to add an additional site and have an approved site for classroom instruction at 10620 Shira. The material revision involves an amendment to the charter petition, and this is the actual amendment one that is being proposed for the charter petition. In essence, it is adding that additional site. It's notable that the amendment is still subject to all charter petition commitments, terms, and conditions of its original petition. The statutory requirements for material revisions, two primarily. One is that any revisions to the charter can only be made with the approval of the authority that granted the charter. In this case, that would be our district's board. And finally, the processes regarding material revisions, they follow in essence the same processes as renewals. The final steps is for the board to consider district staff's recommendation to approve Resolution 3039 to grant the requested material revision and then take action in the subsequent consent agenda item tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. At this time, we'll take public comments on this item. Mr. Barrios, do we have any public comment?
Public comment?
Do we have any questions or comments from board members? And I'm going to ask you tonight, since I don't have a screen indicating who wants to speak, if you can just raise your hand, and I will do my best to call you in the order of which I see your hands go up. It looks like we don't have any questions on this item. This is an information item only. Thank you. Item 8.2, public hearing on advanced placement, AP World Language Instructional Materials, AP French, AP German, AP Latin, AP Chinese. Tonight presented by Dr. Taylor and Matt Turkey. Looks like we have a technical problem. We're trying to pull up the PowerPoint.
Looks like we have it. There we go. So good evening, Board President Ryan, members of the board, and Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Iris Taylor. I'm the Chief Academic Officer, and I'm joined by Matt Turkey, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, and Kari Hansen-Smith, our coordinator of AP and GATE. This evening, we'll be sharing with you the process through which advanced placement world language teachers reviewed and ultimately reached a decision or a recommendation for updated instructional materials to be used in the advanced placement world language courses across the district. When considering instructional materials for use in advanced placement classes, the primary driver of this decision is alignment between the materials and the AP exam expectations. When it comes to AP World Language, the exam requires that students demonstrate both a strong level of language fluency in reading, writing, speaking, and listening across regional accents, and a rich understanding of the culture represented by the language speakers. This includes an understanding of cultural complexities and current events. In making the decision for instructional materials for world languages, the team also took into consideration that the materials aligned with the California Fair Education Act, and the Material Review Committee met over the months of May 2018 through September 2018 to make this decision. Advanced placement course offerings in the district district are clearly a manifestation of the equity, access, and social justice guiding principle. These courses offer students across the district the opportunity to engage in college-level coursework with rigorous academic expectations. And participation in AP courses is viewed as advantageous by colleges and universities, regardless of student performance on AP exams. In terms of the AP World Language, students who score 3 or greater may be able to receive college credit and valuably be exempt from World Language course requirements in college, giving them the greatest number of post-secondary choices from the widest array of options.
Thank you. These are the materials that have been recommended for adoption by the Materials Review Committee. In 2012, the AP course descriptions and exams were updated by the College Board for AP French, German, and Latin. In 2015, the College Board made updates to the course description and exam for AP Chinese. The funds being used for this adoption are exclusively from the State Lottery Fund. These monies are restricted use and can only be accessed for the purchase of instructional materials. The purchase of these materials will not impact the district's general fund. Many of the options sent by publishers for review by the committee were aligned to the typical College Board course expectations. They were college-level texts. However, alignment to AP Language and Culture courses requires that the texts address the 6 cultural themes covered on the AP exam. Ensuring that parents had the opportunity, if desired, to offer input on the materials was made possible primarily at school sites. In addition to placing the materials on public display in the upstairs lobby at the Cerna Center, World Language teachers hosted informational sessions in their classrooms. Parents and students attended these sessions and were able to not only review the materials, but also hear from the teacher. Teachers invited parents and students from all language learning levels. One of the primary considerations by teachers was that the texts reflect the necessary fluency requirements for the AP exams. The College Board in their course description materials explicitly states that AP World Language courses should focus on usage and being understood over a reliance on grammatical proficiency. All of the recommended texts have rich online resources that include current audio and video selections for use both at school and at home. Online resources to replace consumable workbooks were highly sought after by the teachers. These online resources include access to AP exam preparation, offering teachers real-time opportunities for student feedback and support. A consideration of the committee in this year's process was to ensure that the texts selected reflected not only the requirements of the AP course exams, but also the diversity of our community. This was especially important when considering the way in which the texts being reviewed addressed theme number 5, families and community. An additional consideration by the teachers was, ensuring that the texts were appropriately rigorous, ensuring student preparation not only for the AP exam, but also for real-world usage.
And good evening. Our next steps are to provide professional learning for teachers of these AP courses to ensure that both the teachers and the students can get the online access which they need and that they want, and also to provide the forum within professional learning so that teachers can look at the embedded assessments which are online, perhaps come to some agreement on some common assessments, that type of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment. I apologize. One public comment. No public comment. I apologize.
Okay. Comments or questions from board members? So I have just a couple questions. I'm curious as to when the AP instructional materials were last updated.
It's been since before those courses were redesigned by the College Board. So
Can you give me a sense of when that would be?
prior to 2000.
Wow. So the materials are very old. at this point. So that's helpful. I also appreciated in your presentation the way you outlined the efforts to ensure that the diversity of the community was reflected in the review process. That's extremely important to me. I'm happy to hear that the materials are being updated. I think it's obviously past its time, but ensuring that they're updated in such a way and that the curriculum and materials that are adopted are culturally relevant is key in this district. And so I would love actually to see, and I don't see this in the materials before me, the list of the review committee, the schools they represent, as well as the families that were engaged.
Sure, I can get you the names of the, I can get you the names of the parents. Every teacher who was using these materials was on the committee. So every French teacher, Chinese, it's a small end value, but every teacher who will be using these materials made the decision.
And Dr. Taylor, can you remind us how many students were able to take the AP course test free of charge this year as a result of the College Readiness Block Grant?
Unfortunately, I don't have that with me, the exact number of students who were able to do that. Though this year, all students who are taking AP courses will be able to take the AP exam. But for last year, I don't have that information.
Superintendent Aguilar, I don't know if my recollection is correct, but I think it was like 280 students.
Yeah, I could actually go one step further. I'm sorry, that there may be more than that because students who are not currently enrolled in the course may also opt to register to take the exam. So we see every year a significant number of heritage speakers who are not taking the AP course, but opt as freshmen or sophomores to take the AP exam. So we'll have all of our exams ordered by November 9th, so we'll know this year exactly, pretty soon, to tell you exactly how many exams are being ordered.
Wonderful, I appreciate that. I know that this is very much in line with the vision for equity, access, and social justice that we continue to articulate in the district. I'm happy to hear that given our budget crisis that we are able to use state lottery funds for these instructional materials, and I think that that combined with the College Readiness Block Grant and the ability to offer the AP course testing free of charge is a huge win for the district and our students. So thank you so much for your efforts. I look forward to getting the list of the work group.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 8.3, public hearing on the approval of resolution number 3042, compliance with the Pupil textbook and instructional materials incentive program, again presented by Dr. Taylor and Matt Turkey.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, and members of the board. Again, I'm Iris Taylor, the Chief Academic Officer, joined by Matt Turkey, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. And this presentation will focus on and report on the district's compliance with the Pupil Textbook and Instructional Materials Program Act, or Ed Code 60119. This Ed Code requires that by the 8th week of school, we hold a public hearing to certify that all students have sufficient instructional materials that are consistent with the content and cycles of curriculum adoption adopted by the State Board of Education. The core subjects that are covered in this are English language arts, history, social studies, math, science, including science lab equipment, foreign language, and health. The steps that we as a district take to ensure sufficiency include an initial survey of sites to determine that the textbooks and instructional material needs. We gather that information usually in the early spring, and then we redistribute surplus of textbooks and materials, and then we order additional textbooks as needed, including the replacement of lost or damaged materials. We then verify sufficient materials for each student. This year, we're going to share with you just a challenge that we've had with instructional material sufficiency in 2 of our school sites, our Waldorf elementary schools.
Thank you. So on August the 16th this year, the board approved instructional materials for our Waldorf schools, an updated list of instructional materials, so for A.M. Wynne and for Alice Burney. And at this point, some of those materials are actually unavailable from publishers, and others, which are hard to source, are on back order. Because of this, both of those schools have been deemed to have insufficient instructional materials by SCOE. We are currently working very closely with SCOE to make sure that we are remedying this issue. Our next steps for A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney are, first of all, we need to reconvene a committee of folks from A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney. Oh, thank you. We need to reconvene a committee of A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney to actually look at the list and redo that list, because if the list has unavailable materials, we are never going to be able to be deemed sufficient, simply because we can't get a hold of them. So we're going to reconvene some folks and then come back to the board with an updated list, and then ask the board to adopt that updated list. Once we have a new updated list for our Waldorf schools, we're then going to ensure they have all of those materials, and then ask SCOE to come back, who will then verify the sufficiency of those instructional materials. The resolution tonight, Resolution 3042, certifies that sufficient textbooks and instructional materials were provided to each student at all sites other than A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney. Within Resolution 3042, we also ask that the board authorize the use of previously adopted materials for A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney. This slide shows the sufficiencies of all of our grades K-6 schools, and shows that all schools are sufficient apart from A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney. Similarly, for grades 7 and 8, all schools are sufficient apart from A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney. And in the high school space, all of our schools are sufficient. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turkey. Mr. Barrios, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Board member comments or questions? Board member Pritchett, followed by board member Minnick.
Thank you, President Ryan. I have just a few questions for you. On slide 2, can you tell me, in regard to split classes, how the ed code is enforced?
Yes, absolutely. So it's around student materials. So each student needs to have grade level appropriate materials. So for example, with a 2-3 split, what we've done is provide the student materials for the amount of second grade students and the amount of third grade students, and as well as providing the teacher with the materials which they think would best serve their students in the classroom.
So the public hearing date of the 8th week is the same for split level classes?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And in regard to the insufficiency of materials at A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney, can you tell me how the holdup of this will affect their learning and their testing?
Yes, absolutely. So up until now, A.M. Wynn and Alice Burney have had the exact same lists as all of our other elementary and middle schools. Okay, so they've been using those same materials. In actuality, the Waldorf methods doesn't always lend themselves to using those materials. In the first, second, and third grades, students actually make many of their own student materials, and the teachers are using their own teacher materials to supply instruction, okay? So we're actually in the same boat as we have been, except we're trying to get the Waldorf schools the exact materials which they need for their Waldorf methods, and are struggling a little bit to be able to do that, but we're in the same place we have been in those schools for the past few years.
So can you tell me when, have we set a date of when they'll reconvene?
So I'm meeting with folks. I have a meeting on the books tomorrow and on Monday.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Second Vice President Minnick.
Thank you. So just a couple quick questions. One, you mentioned how we're kind of been awaiting, I guess, a publisher or some provider of resources. Do we have a timeline for that? Because you mentioned that, we're in the kind of same situation, that they're using these other resources, but I would argue that they're probably not using them because it doesn't fit with their method. And so I'm curious how long would be continuing to be in this situation when things are on back order or whatever. If you could give us a little timeline on that.
Absolutely. So many of the materials have actually already arrived, and the sorts of things which I'm talking about are math consumables, little workbooks, and novels, okay, particular novels which they read. However, some of them simply aren't available, and so as a group, we need to take those off the list and then consider what would be in their place. Meanwhile, others are on back order. The ones on back order are due to arrive in November.
So then I guess my follow-up is, do all students at both of these schools have access to some of the resources, or are there grades that have none of the resources and others that have all of the resources that they need?
So last year, for example, just to try and help answer your question, we ordered a lot of materials for both of those schools, and they have those materials. So there is no grade level which has no materials. They all have some materials.
They've all
yes.
moved forward with new stuff at some level.
That's correct.
And then you said that the Waldorf schools authorized to use previously adopted materials. Those are what you said we've been doing kind of all along. So in
Correct.
the meantime, they'll potentially supplement some of their new stuff with some of the old stuff that they've kind of sporadically used in the
Yeah,
past.
that's right. And as I say, the novels which we bought last year, for example, they've been using and will continue to use, and the new things which they have this year, they will continue to use as well.
Okay, and this is a temporary situation until we have everything that we need.
That's correct.
Cool, thanks.
Do we have any other board member comments? Okay, so this is an action item. Do we have a motion and a second? Second. Student board member preferential vote?
I vote to approve Resolution 3042.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Item 9.0, Board Workshop, Strategic Plan, and Other Initiatives. Item 9.1, the California School Dashboard, Local Indicator Update. Mr. Harris and Ms. Morrison.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Vincent Harris. I'm the Chief of Continuous Improvement and Accountability, joined this evening with Kathy Morrison, who's our LCAP and SIPSA coordinator. We're excited tonight to present to you the results of our review of our California State Dashboard local indicators. What's important to note about this type of indicator is that unlike the state indicators, which are much more high stakes in terms of measurement and in terms of kind of a value to that measurement, the local indicators actually afford an opportunity to develop indicators in our local context for our local work. And really the measurement here is our ability to share those indicators formally here at a board meeting and within the district staff as well. And so you'll notice that we're meeting those indicators as we get into the presentation, but that's really a function of the process by which these indicators are really meant to drive internal conversation. And so as I just mentioned, by November 16th, we have a hard deadline to make sure that, one, we present them in a public setting, i.e. a board meeting like we're doing tonight, and then also making sure that we upload this data into the dashboard so that it is available for folks to review. In terms of the indicators that make up the dashboard, of course, we will talk later with you about the state dashboard, which is due to be released in December of this year. But tonight we'll focus specifically on the indicators you see circled here. Again, these indicators are meant to be more for information sharing and to drive internal conversations about the results, not so much driven as a judgment, if you will, versus other districts. And as I mentioned previously, as you look at the summative results, we've met all those indicators in our local context. And so Ms. Morrison will give you more information about the indicators specifically, but tonight's presentation was really to share them with you as a part of the formal process of information sharing, and then to let you know as staff, we review these as conversation items to just figure out, what are interesting things about the data in our local context. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Ms. Morrison.
Thank you. Good evening, President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, and board members. For each of the slides on the 5 state priorities, we show the metrics required by the state and the evidence required. Basic services, or Priority 1, includes data from the 2017-18 School Accountability Report Card on teacher credentials, materials, and facilities. Districts report the number of teachers misassigned or teaching outside of their subject area, as well as how many misassignments occur in classes with greater than 20% English learners. The district's vacancies are up slightly over last year, but misassignments are lower. And all students had sufficient standards-aligned instructional materials, and 100% of school facilities met the good repair standard. A survey from the California Department of Education is the basis for our self-assessment on standards implementation. The survey was administered for the first time last year to 44 administrators, and last spring of 2018, we had an increase to 53. The state standards survey covers perception of district progress in providing professional learning, instructional materials that are aligned to standards, and progress in implementing policies or programs that support sites in identifying areas to improve. This table is a snapshot to compare the responses from 2016-17 to 17-18, and these percentages reflect the responses that came in at level 4, indicating full implementation, and level 5, full implementation with sustainability. For priority 3, the district chose to create a narrative response to identify our efforts to involve parents in decision-making and also how the district promotes participation in programs. So the decision-making points indicated include, of course, our school site councils, English Learner Advisory Committee, and the District English Learner Advisory Committee. We also implemented the Graduation Task Force last year, community forums, and town halls that provided voice for parents. And when the state talks about participation in programs, many of them are led by our Family and Community Empowerment Department. We also remove barriers with provided translation and interpretation, and educational opportunities such as the Parent Information Exchange meetings. State Priority 6 is school climate. The district administers a local climate survey each spring. For this portion of the dashboard, we are only asked to report about student perceptions of connectedness and school safety. And much of this presentation has already been shared with board members, so we will go through the data quickly. This report is indicating by grade span, number of students responding to the survey, and the average % of positive responses to connectedness and safety. We know that there are opportunities to build here. This is a report by student group, ethnicity, indicating again the number of students responding, the average % of positive responses to connectedness and safety, and a year-over-year change in each of those areas. And a similar table showing the same data, number of students, positive responses to connectedness and safety, looking at our specific Asian race students. And again, all of these results are for students in grades 3 through 12 throughout the district. For student programs, we look at the students identified by the local control funding formula. So English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged or low-income students, students with disabilities, homeless, and foster youth. Priority 7, course access, has always been part of the state priorities, but this is the first time that it will be represented on the state dashboard. The required narrative on course access asks the district to identify metrics that track the extent to which all students have access to and are enrolled in a broad course of study, with a particular focus on the grade spans, students identified through local control funding formula, and students with exceptional needs. A review of course access in the high school segment aligns with the equity, access, and social justice guiding principle, ensuring that all students are given access to courses that will provide them with the greatest number of post-secondary choices from the widest array of options. So because there is no specific guidance to assess course access for our baseline data in this first year, we chose to identify student groups enrollment in career technical education. This data is from 2017-18, and for the career technical education, it includes students in any CTE program. Advanced placement represents students in grades 9 through 12 who took at least one advanced placement course in 17-18. And the column A through G represents the number of students in 2017-18 who are on track for A through G completion. And as I mentioned, this criteria is completely locally controlled by the district, and we expect that California Department of Education may tighten this up over time. So in closing, the district is going to enter the rating of MET and the associated data for each of these indicators to the California School Dashboard website prior to November 16th. And we are looking forward to the release in early December. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. We have a comment from Cecile Nunley.
Ms. Nunley?
Good evening again. I'll make this one quick. It was just one item that I had on this, and this is speaking for myself. This is not speaking for the LCAP Advisory Committee at all. During our orientation, which was very well done by Ms. Morrison, and I appreciate it, there was a little bit of confusion, I think, because one of the items, it appeared very much that we were told that we are not to make any recommendations. We were only to gather information from stakeholders and make sure that that was included, which is a little confusing to me. I'm just going to say to me and speak for me. I'm not speaking for the rest of the group. But I was wondering if the board could give, and you don't have to answer right now, obviously, but maybe make that a little bit clearer direction to the LCAP advisory as to, we understand we're advisory, but I think there's a feeling that if we could make actual recommendations, whether they're implemented or not, but at least we have the opportunity, because it feels a little weird that we're on an advisory committee, but you don't make any recommendations.
Yeah,
So
that's an excellent piece of feedback, Ms. Nunley, and I was not aware of any action ever taken by the board to not allow feedback in the form of recommendations, so we will certainly follow up on that. Board member comments or questions? Board member Cochran.
Is my mic on? Yes, it is. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the work that you've done in tracking. Now, this is not a part of the official document, and I realize that, but I am wondering about EL coordinators and the number of EL students on sites. Are we doing any kind of tracking of that? And if so, under which department is it done? And you might not know the answer, this might just be a general question, but just in general, I think that for the LCAP particularly, since this is one of our target groups, we really need to know if full services are being provided by the coordinators. The paperwork is astronomical, and I think that this is something that we need to track, and we need to find out if they're there and if students are getting the services they need. Do you know anything about that, just off the top of your head?
I mean, overall tracking would be done by multilingual.
Okay.
In terms of the tracking of the students, the other parts of your question, we would have to get back to you on.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I know this is out of left field, but it is so important for the English language learners. Thank you.
Student Board Member Halpo.
I just quickly wanted to say thank you to Kathy for coming to Student Advisory Council yesterday and giving us basically the same presentation that the LCAP committee got, and know that we are hoping to have some students show up to the second LCAP committee meeting on Monday. So thank you.
Thank you. Second Vice President Minnick.
Just a couple quick questions. So one of the things that you mentioned under priority 3, parent engagement, was the fact that we have these options in terms of translation to increase participation for parents. And I know in the past we've had folks come before us to talk about not having translation, or they'd come and the translator was gone, and we've had complaints about that. And so I just wanted to kind of get a feel, and this might not be something that was collected in this, but have things changed? Has there been like a conscious effort to ensure that we have all these translation opportunities available? I know I was at the Community Advisory Committee for Special Ed last night, and they had quite a bit of translation options for parents. So I just wanted to kind of check about that. That was my first question. I don't know if you have thoughts.
I will say that last year, mid-year, we received a report from the Matriculation and Orientation Center, or MOC, that organizes all the translation. So I do have, not with me, statistics on how many meetings they attend and opportunities. I would say that it is our district standard to provide translation, and I'm guessing that where we may have more challenges are at the school sites where we don't have sufficient staff, maybe after hours. But that is definitely a standard that I think we want as a district to continue removing those barriers. And we did translate all of the SIPSAs this year, which had not been done, but based on the language needs of each site, we've translated the LCAP to 5 languages and the SIPSAs as well, the school plans.
That's awesome. The other question I just had in the data on the respondents to the school climate survey, that there was this drop in participation under the section of like EL, special ed, SED, homeless and foster students. So those have dropped when in some of the other demographics have gone up. And I didn't know if we could, if you can extrapolate any information from that, or if there's been any changes in how we're addressing that, because these are obviously very important voices we want to make sure are heard, especially as we're thinking about school climate. We've heard from a lot of parents here talking about climate issues for their kids, especially for kids that are in special ed and SED classes.
So actually our data review team actually discussed this. The number of students increased year over year as a whole, but we also thought that that was notable, that those student group responses decreased, and our only explanation is that there were different schools taking the survey in larger numbers than others. But going forward, our target is to increase participation in the survey again this year. We went from roughly 11,000 to 13,000. And I will say that the state would like, in a webinar recently, CDE would like threshold to be 70% of students taking this survey. So we have some growth to do there.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to take special focus on making sure those voices are heard moving forward.
Board member, if I could add, part of what we're trying to do too is understand an order of magnitude of the change. So your point is absolutely well taken. In some cases, the change is somewhat, on a percentage basis, relatively small. So we're wrestling with the right type of research to do. But we definitely agree with your point, and we'll do a little bit more digging to see if we can tease out something that makes sense as a trend.
Awesome, appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. I have a couple comments and questions. So on slide 7, I appreciate the gains that have been made year over year in progress in providing professional learning in ELA, ELD, mathematics, social sciences. So it looks like we have about a 5% gain, which is not insignificant. And then supporting the professional learning needs of teachers and administrators, it looks like there's a 6% gain in responses from 2017-18 over the prior year. So I would love to hear, based on that these are both centered in professional learning, some of your early analysis of the increase and what led to that increase.
We'd have to study that a little bit more to get back to you with a concrete response.
Okay, so that is encouraging. I will say, I appreciate that we met the state requirements for parent engagement and school climate, and yet I think it would be disingenuous not to acknowledge we have much more work to be done, meeting those requirements and having our students and families feel like they are welcome, connected, are two very different things. And I think that we know that this next year will be a time when we engage at a higher level because we must. When I'm looking at the data, particularly in slide 11 and 12, I just want to call out a couple things to me that are very interesting and should be sources of continued analysis and part of our conversation for the African American Achievement Initiative, for our work with the Community Advisory Committee and others, because these are populations arguably in crisis. If you look at the response to connectedness, what we see is that in 2017, 2018, our least connected population is our Black population, with almost a 10% difference in the level of connectedness between our Black students and our white students. That to me is incredibly troubling. The only other student population that seems to be in such dire straits is the Hmong student population when you look at the disaggregated data among our Asian races at 60.4%, which to me is also very troubling. Then you look at the connectedness of our EL students, 58.9%. So there is almost a 12 percentage point discrepancy with our white traditional students. And then our special education students, once again, on par with our Black students as among the least connected populations. So I am hopeful that as we're using this data as a tool for change and continuous improvement as a mindset, that you do a deep dive into this and honestly own the data in these various forums in such a way that we lay out a plan for trying to change these statistics next year when we come back to these surveys. That's it. Do we have any other comments? Okay. This is an information item only. Moving on to item 9.2, approve the City of Sacramento Police Department School Resource Officer SRO contract presented by Nina Delgadillo and Lieutenant Adam Green. I gave you a heck of a promotion.
Actually, that's not Adam Green either. He has been moved to another position, and the new captain of our unit is Lisa Hines. She'll be joining me later. Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, members of the school board, community, and colleagues. My name is Nina Delgadillo. I'm the Director of Safe Schools for the district. My job is to liaison with all first responders and to keep our children safe. As part of that job, I am a direct liaison to the police department, and therefore I will be introducing the City of Sacramento Police Department School Resource Officer contract briefing for you this evening. So I'd like to provide an overview of the SRO unit. The School Resource Officer unit is essential in crime prevention and focusing on long-term solutions to ensure the safety of our students, staff, parents, and surrounding community members. Not only does our unit respond to daily safety concerns, they lead with engagement and strive to be proactive versus just reactive. Their input in plans and drills and safety trainings empower others to address safety challenges. 8 officers and 1 sergeant are assigned to our schools: J.F. Kennedy, C.K. McClatchy, Rosemont, Hiram Johnson, Luther Burbank, and American Legion High Schools, along with 2 floater SROs for response throughout 71 school sites, as well as other district facilities. An example of how this can also affect the surrounding communities is very recent. We had one of our school resource officers, Carlos Martinez, was at Burbank High School when he noticed some smoke nearby, and you might have seen the story on the news, but he was able to pull 2 people out of a burning trailer. That is the true benefit also of having an SRO in your community. The current agreement for the peace officer assignment with the City of Sacramento Police Department is pending before the School Board of Education for your approval for the 2018-2020 school years. The terms of this agreement was to become effective July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2020. The SRO roles. I'd like to provide you with a snapshot of what the roles are of the SRO's team. The school resource officers. They provide a safe environment for students, staff, administrators, and parents so students can receive the education that they deserve. They help keep students in school and out of the juvenile justice system. One of the things I'm very proud of is when I came to the school district 5 years ago, we had over 500 students on probation and had gone to juvenile hall in our school district. As of the beginning of this school year, we had less than 100. I count that as a success. We also help to identify reasons why students are experiencing difficulty in school or getting to school. And we work as a unit to help them to resolve some problems and find solutions to get them into the classroom. We also seek input from students on their perception and concerns with school safety and to be part of the solution. We help find shelter, food, or other services for students and families. We do this on a daily basis. We also have positive role modeling. We lead with engagement. The SRO unit itself also offers scholarships to our students, and we continue to support the students that leave our district in higher education. We also provide trainings to staff and students to build confidence in their ability to respond to various situations such as safety on the internet and active shooter response. Since the beginning of last year, we have held numerous active shooter trainings throughout the district for not only students and sites, but also for community. We've held one every single month at Cerna Center. And every time we put out the advisement, it is completely filled within probably a day or two. That leads us into the trainings for SROs. We feel it's important for the community to understand and to be aware of the trainings that police officers that are in their schools receive. They receive different trainings, some from the police department, others from the school district and other sources. On the left column, you will see Sacramento Police Department trainings offered, and this is just a snapshot. Crisis intervention training, tactical communications, implicit bias, LGBTQ gender awareness. Oh, and I was corrected today, it's LGBTQI. Procedural justice, racial profiling, first aid, mental health education. I think it kind of dropped off on the bottom, and deaf awareness. There are also some specialized trainings that are received by the members of the SRO unit. They include school safety conferences. They attend national and local conferences, discuss and learn national safety trends, as well as study active shooter scenarios and incidents so that we can learn and adapt best practices and bring them back to our school district. We also attend the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, for which we are a part of. Tactical Lifesaver course, behavioral threat assessment, preventing the active shooter, violent intruder training. There's also the training for SROs by Sac City Unified and others. These are trainings that we've gone through as a unit within Sac City Unified that is separate from the police department. Anti-bullying, cyber safety, internet crimes, social media responsibility, social emotional training, implicit bias training, policing the teen brain, mental health and first aid, trauma-informed practices, school safety trainings, and homeland security safety briefings. Now that's along with all the trainings that was provided by the police department. Some of the benefits that included with having SROs in our school district is our development of our comprehensive safe school plans. We have a lot of experts in different areas that have helped us make the best plan that we have possible. We are constantly looking to improve it. It's a working document. We work with all the experts that we can find, and we constantly fine-tune those plans. We have added sections that many other school districts have not added, and that's because of the research and the training that we've received. We have an emergency management system that is a pretty good system because it's a rapid responder. It allows all first responders access to our site plans. That includes Sacramento Fire Department, Sacramento Police Department, and the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. And in doing so, that helps us respond to crises in the most efficient manner. We conduct school site safety drills with sites. We evaluate safe routes of ingress and egress during times of stress and crisis. We also assist them with locating reunification points, so that when families have a need to go and reunify with their child after a crisis, that it's a smooth process and that we know where they're going and how they're going to relocate with their students. We help provide resources and student support services. We work very closely with staff, school site social workers, and the support center. We also work with mentoring and mediations at school sites. We do that along with social workers at the site and staff. We're trusted first responders, and we also provide trainings so that we can have the most updated and best practices in our school district. There are also trainings that we in turn provide to the school district, whether it be students, staff, or community, based upon the trainings that we've received. We come back and develop and fine-tune and create new trainings all the time. This is just a portion of the trainings that we provide. Cyber safety training, how to deal with dangerous people, and this can be people that come onto campuses, it can be people in any part of your life, and how to react to that. What to expect when law enforcement arrives, gang awareness, campus monitor trainings, violent intruder and active shooter trainings. We do live exercise trainings, dangers of reckless driving for teens, bicycle and traffic safety training, mass bus casualty live exercise. These are all trainings that we do in addition to things that we do every day in responding to school safety issues. Data request improvements. We recognize that people are very interested in data, and it's something that we need to address. We are currently working with our legal counsel and the Sacramento Police Department's Crime Analysis Unit to determine how we can capture and release data to the board in January of 2018. So that's something that we are currently working on. The unit also conducts truancy sweeps. The school district receives $75,000 a year from the Gang Suppression Violence Grant. The SRO unit thus conducts truancy sweeps at various high schools at least 9 times a year. The purpose of the sweep is to locate students who are truant and return them to the classroom. The officers work with community partners, La Familia, Another Choice, Another Chance, sometimes the Enrollment Center, the LGBTQ community, and we try to help determine if services are needed to further assist the student or their family. An excellent example of this is recently we had a truant student at one of our high schools, and we determined by talking to him that the reason why he was truant was because his family was homeless, didn't have any transportation. The SRO worked diligently to provide shelter to the family, transportation, and that student is currently attending school again on a regular basis. There is a complaint process that we'd like to share with the community. If there's a complaint regarding an SRO, a report may be made to Constituent Services Department at the school district. A report may be made to school administrators. The report may be filed with the Sacramento Police Department either in person, by email, or by mail. The report may be called into police dispatch, or the report may be filed with the police department's Internal Affairs Division. Our recommendation is to approve the 2018-2020 contract with the Sacramento Police Department. If we have any questions, I'd also like to reintroduce Captain Lisa Hines. Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have 14 public comments. If you could stand in line in the order you're called, please. Faye Sharp, followed by Tony Perez, Julie Snyder, Jessica Martin, Christy Wells Artman, Gino Dubrescu, Brooks Larson, Mary Struz, Michael White, Cecile Nunley, Carl Pinkston, Jason Weiner, Dede Flores, and Lamaya Coleman.
I'm going to remind everyone, due to the volume of comments that we have, we're going to be very strict about remaining at your 2-minute time limit. And thank you very much for coming out to speak on this item.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, and members of the board. I'm Faye Sharp. I'm the principal of Martin Luther King K-8 school in the Pocket area. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our SROs. 2 incidents stand out in my appreciation of their services. Last spring, when Kennedy High School was experiencing a rash of threats, our school also received a threatening message. The SROs were notified, and after hours of investigation, our threat was deemed a hoax. Even though they were in the midst of extraordinary challenges at Kennedy, they took the time to help us, providing excellent service. And recently, a couple of weeks ago, I invited our SROs to our school to have an assembly with our 6th through 8th grade students to discuss some of the challenges our students face. Sergeant Brown and Officer Martinez did an outstanding job of making our students feel at ease as they shared a pertinent and timely message, all the while establishing a rapport and a positive relationship with our students. As someone who is responsible for the safety and welfare of hundreds of students, it is comforting to know that when we need help and support, it's a phone call away. I stand here in appreciation for the support of the services of our SROs that they provide to our Martin Luther King school community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, members of the board. My name is Tony Perez. I'm the assistant principal at Hiram Johnson High School, and I'm here tonight to speak in support of the SRO unit. To say that they provide a valuable service would be doing a disservice to what they do. They provide invaluable contributions to the campus, not just on safety matters, but as Director Delgadillo outlined, on mentoring, making connections with families, support services. I know that the director of my student support center is behind me, so I'm not going to steal what I'm sure she's going to talk about. They provide a presence, they provide a comfort, connections to the students. They are often the first interaction with law enforcement where it's not in a confrontational situation, but one of a hand, a friendly face, a smile, or in the case of our outstanding SRO, somebody who's in the weight room with the kids after school, showing something they haven't seen before. Our SROs in the past have pulled students out of human trafficking simply because we noticed them in the hallway and said something looked off. They have provided services to the surrounding community for the feeder schools. I don't think everybody understands, perhaps you do. They oversee not just my high school, but they work with all of those elementary and middle schools. I can't imagine trying to do my job without the presence of the SRO. I would invite every one of you to come out to see the campus and the amazing environment, the climate that they have helped me build at Hiram Johnson. Thank you.
Good evening, President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, members of the Board of Education. My name is Julie Snyder, and I'm a staff member here at Rosemont. Welcome to Rosemont. This is my 24th year of teaching in our school district, teaching science, 13 years here at Rosemont, and it's my 10th year of being the mentor of our LGBTQ club. So I want to speak in strong support of our SRO officers, particularly Officer Lopez, with whom we have the pleasure to work here at Rosemont. He does a fabulous job. I spoke with other staff members, and they said to please say that I'm speaking for them as well and our students. As you know, SROs are educators. They're informal counselors as well as law enforcement officers. And they protect all of us, not just people on the campus, but the community at large as well. They handle small issues to try to keep them small, and the bigger ones, you know, they are able to refer on to other individuals, whether it be mental health people or other folks in the community that can help out. Personally speaking, I've seen them, I've referred bullying to them and have them handle that. I've had students that were inebriated, and they've been able to intervene with that and stop it from being a bigger issue. They screen students on a regular basis if they are even suspected of being inebriated on any particular substance. And they've prevented acts of violence, students that have brought guns and knives to school. And many of these things I never even hear about because it doesn't get to that level. They help with emergency drills. They do the truancy sweeps, as was mentioned. And they conduct home visits and assist other staff members in home visits for students that are at need. I know that they also help host the summer workshops here for students on campus, along with other members of the police department, which is a wonderful benefit to the students and the community. I can't imagine teaching here without the support of officers like Officer Lopez and the others, so thank you very much for your help with keeping them on.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Ryan, members of the board, and Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Jessica Martin. I am a parent of a Rosemont High School student. I'm a community member of this Rosemont community. I'm the current assistant principal at McClatchy High School, and I'm also a youth softball coach, hence the attire, so excuse that, please. I want to speak personally to my experiences working with SROs. I've been an assistant principal at various school sites this is my 7th year. And my experiences have been nothing but wonderful, positive partnerships. Personally, I worked with an SRO to develop a peer mentor program for which she provided training to our peer mentors, our student peer mentors from the Sacramento Police Department. I also partnered with an SRO to provide cyberbullying and social media responsibility training to all of the 9th and 10th graders at the site because our data suggested that we had specific issues in those areas. In times of crisis, especially in these times, their presence adds a sense of safety. I was in a situation where there was a semi-automatic rifle on campus. Really scary, but the presence of the SRO just kind of made the response immediate. I knew that we were okay because there was someone there right then. We didn't have to wait for a response. I want to note that I think it would be a huge mistake to remove them. It's obvious in working with them that they have a lot of specific training to support youth. And so it's not like a harassment situation like some people think. A lot of support, a lot of time goes into supporting the students with truancy, attendance, home life, counseling. The sky's the limit. So thank you for your time.
Good evening, Board President Ryan and Superintendent Aguilar and esteemed board members. My name is Christy Wells-Artman. I'm the proud principal at New Joseph Bonheim Community Charter, a dependent charter in Sacramento City Unified. And I'm here to speak on the benefits and support of our SROs. As you know, school safety is of the utmost importance to schools, students, families, and the greater Sacramento community. There is a great and dire need where positive and trusting partnerships between schools and SROs working together, along with law enforcement in building safe schools. And as Nita pointed out, our SROs wear many, many hats. NJB has had a very positive partnership with our SRO in ensuring that these needs are met. Our experience with our SRO has resulted in the following. They have been a great assistance to our school in building a safe school climate and working with students and helping them get on the right track with confidence. They often arrive before other law enforcement does, and they assist readily. They help with communication to families regarding potential dangers. They assist with our safety plan, and they work with our safety team with any questions that we have. They quickly answer for us. They provide resources, trainings, feedback, and security when needed by the school. They are professional, knowledgeable, and courteous with all staff, scholars, and families. It is my strong belief that SROs benefit our schools greatly, and thank you for considering renewing.
President Ryan, Mr. Superintendent Aguilar, distinguished board members, thank you very much for taking the time once again to be here. to listen to us. My name is Gino Dobrescu. I'm the principal at Pony Express Elementary School. And I have two reasons why I came here tonight, a personal reason and a professional reason. Professionally, I like to thank every resource officer and every police officer, for that matter, for the time they took their oath, for the time they responded to my need, for your service, for my security, for your bravery, for my peace, for my protection, for your courage, for my safety, for your sacrifice, for the times you've left your families, for the time you risked it all to come and support me and my community and all of us. Professionally, I worked as a vice principal at McClatchy High School for 2 years, and daily I worked side by side with the resource officer. And I like to let you know that every time I do an investigation, and sometimes hourly, I remember the training, the awesome training that they gave me to make my life extremely successful as a school administrator. So I'd like to thank Joe Brown, D.T. Martin, Officer Lay, Officer Martinez, Officer Justin Brown. I have a safety plan, and I'm very careful about completing that safety plan on time, and I'd like to thank Nina Delgadeo for her support. Personally, I want you to know that for the first 35 years of my life, I had a bit of a problem with the little fear when I saw a police officer. After working with them for the last 4 years now, I have the most respect for these people. I thank them for what they do, how they benefited us with knowledge, training, experience, a highly visible presence, their high moral standards, and their very good use of judgment and discretion. And I use that every day, and that is because of them. So thank you for considering approving this and continuing with our SROs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Struess. I coordinate the student support centers at Hiram Johnson High School, Wilsey Wood Middle School, and American Legion High School. I'm here to urge your support for the SAC PD contract for the SROs. Over the last 18 years, I have directly witnessed the benefit of having an on-site police officer that specializes in serving our middle and high school students. SROs are able to immediately respond to threats and crimes committed on our campus. Their presence acts as a deterrent for greater crimes. When students disclose that they have been victims of crime, which oftentimes happens through our student support centers, we are assured that the SRO will respond with sensitivity and compassion to our students as they take their crime reports. Our SROs accompany us on home visits for truant students. They do welfare checks when a student says that she or he does not feel safe going home. They talk with parents. They support them. They offer resources to parents and guardians, many of whom may be feeling overwhelmed with a son or daughter who is not wanting to come to school or maybe making unhealthy or unsafe choices. One of the most important roles that they play in deterring crime is acting as a mentor to our students. And given my longevity in the district, I've worked with many SROs, and the kinds of things that we have taken on in a partnership through the support center have been things like sexual assault risk reduction workshops. We've had our SROs talk with our students about when they are a victim of a crime, what can they expect in the way of support and resources and just the crime reporting process. One of our SROs a few years ago went into pretty much every 9th and 10th grade class with me, basically to blanket Hiram Johnson with suicide prevention education. Very powerful. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael White. I'm the school social worker at American Legion High School. I wanted to come out to voice tremendous support for our SRO program. I've seen a lot of benefit that we've gotten on our campus from having SROs available. First off, with students that are on probation, as Nina mentioned earlier, having an SRO on campus allows me to very quickly get in contact with those students' probation officers, get them the requirements they need, their community service, their counseling, and all of students that will come to me that don't even know who their PO is and don't know what they're supposed to be doing, and I'm able to find that information for them, get it done, and get them on with their lives, which I appreciate. I think that it's important for us to have that sense of safety on campus from our SROs, that our students can feel safer, our staff can feel safer. And on a kind of deeper level, I enjoy seeing that a lot of our students, unfortunately, have had some very negative experiences with police officers and even some, frankly, traumatic experiences with police officers. And for them to be given the opportunity to forge a positive relationship with an officer who truly is a part of the community and a part of the family on our campus has been very touching to me. And to see them be able to foster that relationship and have someone that they see every day and that they feel comfortable with and that they get to know, I think can have lasting impact on their lives in terms of who they can trust and who they can come to for support. And also, I know it's difficult to think about, and I don't even like talking about it, but with our current climate in this country, with school shootings and the horrific tragedies that we've had to be facing, I don't want to be looking back on this meeting months or years from now and think, man, like I wonder if it would have been different if we'd been able to have our SROs on campus. And I would rather us take every precaution at the forefront to make sure that we have every safety possible for our students and our staff, rather than to look back and wish we'd done something differently. Thank you.
Good evening again, Board. And I want to do this quickly before I forget, and to thank Nathaniel Browning, because he's been very, very responsive to any questions or any of my needs, and I really do appreciate that. And sometimes we forget to say thank you, so I wanted to say thank you to Nathaniel. A couple of questions that I did email earlier, and I believe it's been shared with all of the board members, and I have those specifically on the contract. The other thing, in the actual agenda item, there was 2 reports that were referred to. I was able to find one online, the other I was not. However, there are other reports that I'm wondering about, as far as, is the board aware that there are other reports either put out by ACLU or other members that tell a little bit of a different story with regards to the benefit of SROs. And even I have a number of those reports here, and there's others that are talking about putting more cops in schools won't make schools safer, and it will likely inflict a lot of harm. And as you can imagine, and some of our speakers have talked about how the kids come and they've had some negative experiences, and you can imagine, especially for the African American community, that is true. Some of those things that I want to just very quickly read into there. The contract refers to a joint panel between the city and the district. Who's on that panel? They talk about required training is listed in the contract. Is there a record? What I heard on the presentation was that it was offered. Is that one of those that they can just offer and it's not required? The contract says that it's required. Is there a record? Are there sign-in sheets? Is there an approved agenda type thing? What's going on with that? Section 5 or Section 4 also talks about absences and that the city can select a replacement. It seems that initially when they're selecting the officers, it has to go through that joint panel, but the absence, it doesn't have to go through the joint panel. And I'll try and
Ms.
go
Nunley, if you can please wrap up. I actually did not receive your question, so if you have a copy of that, if you can pass it up, I'd like to take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Ryan and Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Carl Pinkston. I'm with the Black Parallel School Board. Based on the Federal Department of Education, the Office of Civil Rights in 2015, the Sacramento City Unified School District had 8 full-time police officers, but they had 158 referrals to law enforcement. And also there was 158 school-related arrests during the same time period. But what makes it most intriguing is that black students only represent 15% of the student enrollment, but they represented 44% of all referrals to law enforcement and 44% of all school-related arrests. Suspension and expulsion cuts off students from the positive interaction of schools and also setting students up for a variety of negative life outcomes. SRO interferes with the overall opportunity for students to learn, in some cases creating a very sense of fear that they are supposed to prevent. And I know that personally. Causing students to miss school and otherwise become disengaged from schools, set off a chain of reactions of missed opportunities that leads to school to prison pipeline, which is very well documented. So I want to conclude with three things. One is that we, as I've often and provided to some of the board members, a need for an MOU. Many school districts have that with their police department. That's critically important. And also, we really need to take a look at limiting the number of SROs as we crank up and really bring online the critical importance and utilization of restorative justice practice and positive behavior in the intervention program.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkston.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, members of the board. My name is Jason Weiner. I'm a parent in the district of 3 students. I former member of the LCAP committee and work with Sacramento Act, which represents nearly 50,000 residents of Sacramento County. In the presentation that you just heard and the comments and anecdotes you just heard, you heard nothing about 2 items, data and the contract language that's actually at issue here. And the reason is because both are incredibly deficient. Despite the unsupported assertions in the presentation that were made, there is not any preponderance of evidence that having uniformed officers on campus makes campuses safer than otherwise. There is not any preponderance of evidence that having uniformed officers on campus versus more counselors, more guidance counselors, more trained psychologists makes students safer or outcomes better for those students. The presentation had no data on why SROs in our schools are a benefit compared to those other options. The contract draft itself has no transparency requirements for the community and no accountability measures for follow-through or when there are problems. Principals in the district have no ability to require training on restorative practices or anything else. It just suggests that they would offer those trainings. The contract includes no data reporting requirements. Why, when SRO contracts have been in place in this district for nearly 10 years, are we still saying we're going to look at what data will be reported and how it will be reported and made public to the community? No contract should be approved without this spelled out either in the contract language or in an MOU, especially given that our city of Sacramento has failed to put in place accountability requirements for our officers. The contract should be pulled back and renegotiated with transparency and with engagement of parents and leaders. There is no reason that it needs to be approved today, especially given that $3 million are at stake when we're in a budget crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiner.
Hi, my name is Lamaya Coleman. I'm a parent in the district, a sub in the district, and a member of Sacramento Act. So I'm concerned about us putting $3 million into school resource officers when we're looking at budget reductions. And a lot of what was spoken to by commenters is really important. The connections, the mentoring, the reaching out to students. But are SROs the best tool? Are they better than social workers, than counselors? Is it a better tool than bringing more teachers online with the parent-teacher home visit project, which also creates those connections, those relationships, the reaching out to that student who's been absent from your class, 5 times or whatever. So I'm concerned about the fiscal investment. And I really feel like we should be focusing our resources more towards the healing, the restoration, restorative justice, culturally relevant supports. Sorry. And I do think, of course, that we do want to have access to law enforcement. There's situations where it's important to have access to law enforcement. And I assume that schools have access to law enforcement just like I have access to law enforcement in my own house. If there's an emergency, we can call law enforcement. So yeah, I really question how are these super important needs and roles best filled? Is it best through SROs, or is it better through people who are explicitly practitioners in connection and healing? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
My name is Teresa Flores. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak to you today. I'm the Director of Organizing for Sacramento ACT, Area Congregations Together. And I also lead our education and juvenile justice campaign. So the issue that we're talking about right now is right at the intersection of my work. As I said, we work on juvenile justice, and actually, I don't have to spend time talking about the school to prison pipeline that I'm sure, hopefully, you all are aware of. But what I do want to share is that actually, especially in today's climate, there is a real fear and there is trauma that Black students particularly, but also other students, immigrant students, are facing, and that the presence of law enforcement on schools actually increases. Research shows actually that campuses where there's a heavy police presence, there's also increased suspension rates, attendance issues, and as I was saying, feelings of anxiety among female, Black, and non-Black students of color and immigrant students. So as others have said today, as our district is facing budget reductions, we believe that budgets are a moral document. Our budget is a moral document. So as you look at that, I would ask you to consider whether this is where we want to prioritize our money, especially in these times. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you will not approve that contract, at least for tonight, until those other revisions are made that will ensure greater accountability, transparency, and trust from the community.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members, superintendent, and the rest of the wonderful people in the audience. My name is Jose Verdin. I'm the parent advisor at CK McClatchy High School, and I do have a lot of positive experiences in regards to SROs in terms of going to home visits, interventions, mentoring as well. My time at McClatchy, I've been able to work with Officer Brown and Officer Gonzalez, and I do have a lot of wonderful experiences, and I actually want to share, highlight our SRO, Officer Gonzalez. He's actually a product of our police magnet program at JFK, Kennedy High School. And a lot of the parents have seen very hopeful, especially our Latino parents have seen a lot very hopeful because they see an SRO that looks like them. And especially a lot of our students are going through our police academy magnet program. A lot of the parents, they like that they have a mentorship program there as a police academy program, but they also have an SRO that looks like them. And it's also a perfect time for us to develop, as a school district, to develop a good relationship with our police department. And I think it's going to be beneficial for our marginalized communities. And as a Latino, I do want to make sure that we continue to support our SROs. Thank you.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, board members, Superintendent Aguilar. I'm Brooks Larson. I'm a veteran educator with SCUSD and an active member of the Sacramento City Unified Teachers Association, Sacramento City Teachers Association. I'm representing Ethel I. Baker Elementary and our principal, Amber Carter, who penned these comments. Ethel I. Baker is located off of Fruit Ridge and Stockton Boulevard. Our school is approximately 650 students and 40 staff members. We are located in the county of Sacramento, but most of our calls for service are answered by our school resource officers. In a joint effort to protect our students and staff, the response times are typically quick because they place school safety at the top of their priority list. In the 2017-2018 school year, there were at least 10 calls for service due to one of the following: nearby shooting 5 houses away, 3 lockdowns, and several nearby threats to campus and student safety and people on site needing assistance. Other routine stops including reviewing our school safety plan, training teachers on most recent violent intruder protocol, traffic safety plan, training teachers on traffic help, school walkthroughs for threat assessments, vulnerability in the facility, and calls to other agencies, CHP, sheriffs, EMTs, regarding school safety or individual student staff. The network that SROs, Sergeant Brown, and Safe Schools Director Nina Delgadillo is one that all principals rely on. The training, assistance, and support they provide is invaluable. In our capacity as principals, we sometimes find ourselves remiss without adequate training. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And that concludes our public comments, Mr. Barrios. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to board member comments and questions. I think our first comment was from board member Pritchett. If you can please, board members, I just want to make sure I catch you all, lift your microphone as board member Cochran has done, and I will cue you up accordingly. Board member Pritchett, followed by board member Cochran.
Thank you, President Ryan. I have just one question and then some comments. My one question is, I see on here that the contract actually expired July, right? Can you tell me that, I remember 2 years ago, we were behind then as well, right? Can you tell me what the holdup is every year?
I can tell you that the contract was forwarded from the police department and my department in July.
Okay. In July. So why is it being brought to us now in November? October. We're not November yet, October. We don't know.
No.
Okay. Okay, so these are my questions, or my comments then. Maybe I'll talk to you offline about that and how we can kind of streamline. So, I had one complaint about this whole process, is that we do not have enough of them. I see on here 8 officers and 1 sergeant for 71 school sites, 40,000 plus students. I can tell you in 2012, 13, I believe we had 14 officers, and then we cut it down to 8. I think that was the number. The benefit of having that many officers, and I can speak for my area, Area 3, is that we had a full-time officer at Rosemont High School, and then we had an officer that was stationed at Einstein Middle School, but also rotated out to our elementary schools. We are in the county. I always talk about we're in this little pocket, right? And it's kind of a weird little area. The response times for crimes in our area that took place around our students was great, because we had those 2 officers. Now we have the 1 officer trying to do it all. And I've seen him run ragged. I've said from the dais before, I just want to say that the list of the SRO roles on here does not do it justice. I've said before, and I'll say it again. Go out and visit your SROs. Go to your school sites. Go show up to a Friday night football game and just see the interaction that our SROs have with our students. They are building relationships. They're almost like this big brother to our students. They're keeping them safe. And $3 million, that's worth, I can't even imagine, like, 1 life. $3 million? You know, the situation that we had take place at JFK, that's not my area, but I know a lot of families that live over there. And one thing, an overarching comment that I heard from a lot of people was that the response to get those kids out and get them safe, right? Kids weren't running around ragged. It was a serious situation. And that's just one of many that happened. So I want to thank you for your work on that. I know that usually, we don't talk to cops unless we need them, right? And so I think that, this contract is much needed in our district. It keeps our students safe. It keeps our staff safe. And one day, I know it's not going to happen now, but one day, hopefully, we're talking about more. And is there room for improvement? Yes. I'm sure that Captain Hines will admit there is always room for improvement. There's always room for the talk of how we can, change things in each area. Each of our areas is not a cookie cutter area, right? Each SRO has to learn that community and how things are taking place in those communities. How are those kids interacting? What has been their interaction with a police officer before, and how can they change that outcome for them? So with that being said, I'm going to move to approve the contract with the Sac City Unified School District and the Sacramento Police Department SRO program.
Board Member Cochran, followed by Board Member Minnick.
Thank you. A little bit out of order here. So the first comment I'd like to make is when you actually need an SRO in an extreme circumstance, I'm not talking about individual students' interaction, but in an extreme circumstance, you're going to be very glad that that person is on campus. I just want to make that comment and just kind of keep a little bit of perspective. So I'd like to appreciate the comments about Hiram Johnson. It's made a huge difference. One thing that has helped also is the optics at Hiram Johnson. There was a day you'd go to Hiram Johnson and there'd be 4 or 5 squad cars in front. And I think that moving the cars not right in front of the school, actually working to interact with the students has been a lot better for the campus. And thank you for that. So, you know, teachers have like 300 student contacts per day. I'm sure the SROs have more than that. But one thing I'd like to suggest, and it's not part of this contract, it's more of a almost a moral imperative or a method of operation. It's kind of the soft work to do, the human work. If SROs were a little bit more involved with adjunct duties, maybe lunchtime duty, supervising a soccer game, or taking on after-school adjuncts like many, many teachers do. I know that you visit clubs, but actually taking a role in that. Maybe not wearing the uniform, identifying as PD, if more casual clothes, that also would help. It's soft human work, but that can help as well. Sometimes the uniform is a little bit intimidating or outright dangerous to some people who've had bad experiences. So an example that I'd like to give is that we, Superintendent and I on Wednesday went to Kit Carson Middle School. And we saw, I guess, hundreds of students playing flag football in the new program from the superintendent. Excellent program, beautiful fall day, tons of parents, tons of kids watching as well. An SRO showing up, casual clothing, meeting parents, meeting kids, you break into that fear, you break into the attitudes of people who've had bad experiences to know that there are good people out there who are out there protecting them. So it's not in the contract, it's a suggestion. I would like to second this contract with the caveat that all of us are aware of the societal problems, and I just push the SRO program and the members that work on campuses to change that dynamic. Thank you.
Board Member Minnick.
Thank you. So first, I want to thank Ms. Delgadillo for answering my many questions that I sent you over the last week about this and clarifying the difference between SROs and our district security, because some of my questions were more geared at that, so I appreciate that. I do want to acknowledge all the comments I heard about the importance of relationship building, and I absolutely understand the fear that many people have for law enforcement. I like to think that these are the opportunities we have to create those relationships that can help address that. So, you know, I appreciate the work you're doing and all the commentary I heard about the experiences that many of these principals and teachers have had with the officers, I think is huge. I also really appreciate seeing that list of all the district-specific training that the SROs go through, that it's not just, you know, a bunch of scary cops hanging out in a classroom. You know, they're really taking this seriously. And actually, probably 10 or so years ago, I took the Policing the Teen Brain training with you, Captain Hines, I kind of had forgotten about it, and then I remembered kind of how impactful that was. I remember at the time and thinking about how, you know, we look at young people and how we address their needs. So I appreciate the level of professional development that's going on specific to this work, not just in terms of generic law enforcement, but the specific to the needs of our kids. So I really appreciate that. A couple questions. One is, you know, we've been talking a lot here, and it's been being discussed in the African American Initiative Task Force is our suspension rates, predominantly around African American students. And I wonder if you could maybe address what role you feel maybe the SROs play in, positive or negative in terms of the dealing in how we address our kind of unacceptable suspension rates for African American kids.
Well, I know that we work with, some of the SROs on the team work with the Black Child Legacy Campaign. And so those are things that probation officers have done, and we've worked alongside with them. I'd have to probably talk to the team more about specifics and get back to you. But I know that they are very focused on trying to serve everyone and certainly underrepresented demographics.
Right, and I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming SROs for our suspension rates, because I know those are decisions that are made at the school administrator level, but I just wanted to kind of put that maybe on the radar. The other question is that one of the comments that I heard kind of concerned me was around data reporting requirements in the contract. And I think Mr. Weiner had asked about that, and I wondered if you could address that, or if it's something we need to look back at, because I do have some concerns in terms of making sure that we have documentation of kind of every touch that happens with our kids, so we know what kind of support they're getting or whatever.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. First, I want to digress to say that I was a lieutenant 6 years ago in charge of the school district contract, school district police in the SRO program. And I've participated and been the president of Cops and Kids for over 15 years on my off time to run that program to have better relationships between the police, local law enforcement, regional law enforcement officers, and we hold it right here on this campus where we reach 375 at-risk kids. And we do the very thing you were talking about, where we wear shorts and t-shirts all week, we coach the kids in sports, and then Friday we wear a uniform. So we kind of do it in reverse because we know the need for building relationships. Related to data, why it was so vague. So every month data is produced on alarm calls for service, that sort of thing. But it's more generic, more overarching, like if there was a robbery report, more crime specific. And we realized the need when we got together. I just came back to the school district when I got promoted a few weeks ago. We realized the need to really drill down, and the police department's already working with the Department of Justice and some other entities to drill down on minority data, and so we need to work. So we do have data. It's just probably not exactly what these folks would like in regards to figuring out what we can release, because obviously we're dealing with juveniles, but we want to be able to produce something to you that's more substantive, that would actually help with your suspension rates and so forth. But going back to your other question, we don't offer advice ever. SROs are not disciplinarians, period. And I should never hear otherwise. So my SROs should never offer advice on whether a child should be suspended or any school discipline. We enforce the law, we support the kids and mentor them in all the wonderful things that we do, but we should have zero, that should be our line, zero. And I've never heard of one of my SROs offering what a child's discipline should be with an administrator.
I appreciate your comments, and so I wouldn't hold up this contract over my comments around the data reporting, but I think that maybe this could be an ongoing conversation about how we can extrapolate the most information from the SRO's experience, so we can use that to address some of our things we talked about earlier around school climate. Thank you.
Student Board Member Halbo, followed by Board Member Myving.
So this may be a little longer and a bit more scattered than usual, but I spent a year delving into the complexities of school resource officers and the correlation between school resource officers and the school-to-prison pipeline with high school students across the nation and the policy debate community. The importance of things like implicit bias training and training procedures that we have was shown to me through this experience. Several Rosemont students, including Amani Waru, Albrielle Joy Arrington, Jaden Watts, Lily Deering, Caitlin Raymond, and Serena Jones expanded the conversation about school resource officers and the school-to-prison pipeline to include things like implicit bias training, as well as restorative justice practices, and the role that anti-Blackness and structural disadvantages play in the school-to-prison pipeline and the impact of school resource officers in those areas. Like Ms. Nunley said, the impact of school resource officers on students, particularly African American students, has been proven to not necessarily be productive or beneficial. Evidence of this ranges from the ACLU to Wilderson's theories of anti-Blackness and Afro-pessimism. These conversations are incredibly important for our students to have. The presence of school resource officers, while controversial, has been shown tonight by the many administrators to be incredibly important on our school sites. Student Advisory Council and I look forward to working with Nina in the future to have important conversations about school resource officers and the impact of school resource officers on our school sites. I personally know several school resource officers, and I know how much they care about our students. That being said, the lack of mandatory restorative justice programs and the lack of recognition of the issues with the correlation between the school-to-prison pipeline and school resource officers makes me personally uneasy with the language in the contract and its purpose. I think revisions need to be made to the contract in order to truly put all of our students' safety first. I definitely understand the importance of school resource officers during situations like what happened at JFK. I just think that the societal problems are bigger and heavier than the presentation and contract give them weight. Schools may be the place to start good police interaction, but that does not change years of structural influence and biases that are still seen in our system. I think we need to have further discussion with our students and community before further action is taken.
Thank you, Student Member Halbo. Board Member Vang.
Can you guys hear me? So there is no doubt in my mind that our schools, our neighborhood schools, our districts, we have a duty to use all effective means necessary to maintain a safe learning environment for our students. And we know that climate impacts our students' learning, so it's critical for us to ensure that our schools continues to be safe, healthy, and nurturing environment where every student can reach their full potential. I do appreciate, Nina, the work that you and your staff has done around the comprehensive school safety plans, and also the emergency management system. I think that's very important. However, I do want to caution, I think as a school district, I want to also share with my colleagues that I don't think we should become reliant on SROs. I think school staff and administrations should be well trained to address behavioral issues through a variety of like non-punitive interventions, including, I think a lot of our community members spoke today about restorative justice and mental health programs. I think oftentimes when I'm looking at the roles of SRO, working with students experiencing difficulties in schools, I'm thinking that's the role of our counselors or social workers, right? I also think, Dr. Taylor has really begun to do a lot of work around the multi-tier behavior support framework in our school district, and we're beginning to actually have some momentum around that. I think it's also really important that, community members have mentioned tonight regarding our deficit, right? This is also $3 million. That also means $3 million that we could be using for counseling or other preventive initiative and programs that has wider impact on our students. I do have similar concerns regarding the data piece about the accountability in the contract, and I know for me, with conversations that I've had on the ground with students and parents, having SROs on campus doesn't necessarily mean that our students feel safe, especially for many of our Black and brown students. I'm also concerned with the level of citations given at our school sites from the reports and the conversations I've had on the ground. I think as a board, we talk a lot about addressing inequities in our system, but we also need to ensure that as school board members, we're not recreating the same kind of structure that we're trying to fight against, right? And that means colluding and being part of the school to prison pipeline. In some ways, if we do become reliant on just SROs, I think as a school district, we've done a disservice to our students as well. And if we're not intentional, if we're not careful about the policy decisions we make or the contracts that we vote on, we can actually do more hurt for our students. I actually would like to make the recommendation, I know there's a motion on the dais right now, that we actually do not take a vote on this contract. That doesn't mean that I'm against the contract, but I think that community members brought up a lot of critical critical points. And I want to ensure that we actually bring the contract back. I know that the Policy Governance Committee is currently working to revise a board policy around student law enforcement interaction with student. And I want to make sure that, we include community stakeholders in that process. I do think that there needs to be revision to the contract. I think Cecile brought up some really good points about the contracts, and she had some questions. And I want to make sure as a board member, before I vote on something, that we're able to address those questions. And so I know there's a motion on the table right now, President Ryan, but I would actually like if I'm also going to make a motion once, I know there's like a process to this, but I would like to make a recommendation not to vote and for us to bring this back after the contract has been reviewed.
So we have a motion on the table with a second. We also have a counter motion on the table that we would bring this contract back for review at a later board meeting. I actually will second that motion, and I have some thoughts and comments that I want to share, but first we'll hear from Board Member Jay Hansen.
Thank you very much. One, just to kind of address some of the different things and give my thoughts on this. I think that it's there's certainly a cost that comes with that. We have 43,000 students. I think it's only fair that we share in the cost of providing safety and law enforcement for our students to the city. We shouldn't just ask them to do that burden all for us. Yes, we pay for it in our day-to-day lives, but as a school district, I think we have an obligation to be part of that. The fact is crime does happen, and we do need security, we do need police, so having SROs just in that circumstance is really important. The diversity is a wonderful thing. I see it at McClatchy High School. I know that they are a big part of the campus there, so I think that they're doing far beyond simple security measures, and those are the kinds of things that I think are really important. It's great for people to see a uniform and to understand that that is actually somebody who's helping protect you and protect your community, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. We might wish it would, but the kind of work that happens at the SRO level, I think, helps promote that, and that's a very big positive as well. I've heard a lot of people talk about restorative justice. We had a program, and remember it got pulled, and I would ask Carl and other folks, if you want to see that happen, you need to talk to SCTA leadership. They're the ones that boycotted the meetings and made us pull that whole program, and that's where that's at right now. So if we want to get serious about that, they have to come to the table. That has not happened. I also do share in the concerns with the contract. I think that just a recommendation, the cost should be part of our presentation. The contract should be something that is in, our packets and more accessible. And I think that because of the folks that, what we know very well here in Sacramento in our community, people have a concern and want to, have more transparency in this. So I think it would be important to have a board member or two be part of the contract review. So, we're making sure that it's done properly and we have more information about that. So I am a little bit uncomfortable. I absolutely support extending our contract. There's not a problem there, but I'd like to see more participation at the board member level of how this particular contract's done. And I'm not a fan of micromanaging different pieces of the district's governance, but I think just because of all the sensitivities around this, that would help give a lot of extra confidence to not only to the board members, but the community as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hansen. I want to begin by thanking the captain for your service and work with Cops and Kids. I appreciate that program, and there are many testimonials in my community. I also appreciate the work of Nina and her team, and I will say, arguably, I think at American Legion High School, we have one of the best SROs in the district, one of the kindest, hardest working, most connected to the community. That being said, I feel like you both can support law enforcement and want to ensure the best possible contract contract in order to meet the needs of students in our community. And I know that often I'm kept up at night grappling with things like the data revealed in the Capital of Suspension showing that the Sacramento region and Sacramento City Unified School District across the whole state has the highest rates of suspension. Those are our children, those are my children. And when we see that and we see a community in crisis, we have to have the spirit of bringing data forward with hopes of ensuring greater accountability and transparency within our community. I have lots of questions in looking at the contract and looking at the data or lack thereof. I want to ensure that in the contract we don't just talk about trainings, but we require some trainings that we believe are going to be key to the ability to serve our students. And also instill confidence in our community that in fact we are doing the due diligence necessary to be culturally competent. Specifically, that training to me is training around implicit bias, not training that we hope that everyone will undergo, but that is required, training around trauma-informed practices. These are key pieces, and restorative practices as well. I think ensuring that we also have clear data by site, by SRO, by type of infraction. Did that interaction with the SRO result in a citation? Did it result in a suspension? I know I've heard you say today that you do not, as SROs, take disciplinary action. We need data at a site level, disaggregated, I would argue, by race and ethnicity to ensure that, in fact, that is the case. Lost class time. We know that when students are not in class, in fact, that significantly affects their ability to achieve academically and also their sense of belonging at the school site, often resulting in chronic absenteeism. I want to know, for instance, on a regular basis, not only this data, but what we're doing to mitigate data if it's troubling and, in fact, we believe is not supporting student learning and school site achievement. So these are some of the things that, for me, are key. I think we heard from one of our former LCAP Parent Advisory Committee members, Jason Weiner, that there was also some concern that without the data in a administration that clearly prizes data as a tool for social justice and continuous improvement, we can't feel confident that this is the best contract that it can be. I believe we can feel confident that we have wonderful SROs, and I think in the spirit of ensuring that we're serving our students, spending a bit more time delving into the contract so that we can develop the tools for accountability and transparency serves us all well. I would also say that shame on us as a board if we're not doing due diligence and operating with an intense level of scrutiny when a $3 million contract is before us at a time when we're grappling with the type of budget deficit that we are. Each and every decision and contract that we enter into should be done so with a magnifying glass and with the utmost seriousness. And so for me, this motion and my second to add some addendums to the current contract so that we can feel confident that we are able to assess beyond some very compelling qualitative stories and what I know, having been on campuses firsthand, that the data supports what we believe it will, that our school resource officers are serving our students. I don't believe we can move forward with this contract. So with that, we have a motion and a second on the table. So I was going to, we'll vote on the first motion, and then, you have another question.
Actually, it is an independent superseding motion, the second one. If that passes by 4 votes, no action will be taken on the contract. So even though you had a motion and a second on the first, there can be an independent superseding motion with a second, and if that has 4 votes, no action will be taken on this contract.
Okay, do I take the comment from Board Member Cochran before the independent superseding motion?
That's certainly up to you and your prerogative, Madam President.
Member Cochran?
That's not confusing at all. But I'd like to support your clear and pinpointing of data being so important, clear as a bell, and I fully support you, President Ryan. I do stand by what I said about the SROs and the importance on campus, but I hear and understand the community as well. I'd like to thank the student board member and member Mai Vang for pointing out the need for having SROs that are sensitive to the community needs. President Ryan, I'll leave this to you to see if this can be worked into the contract, but the idea of having some adjunct duties actually in part of the contract might be beneficial to look at. Teachers do, why can't this contract? Something to think about anyway. And I'd also like to clear up a point about restorative justice. It is the role of this board and the district. We are responsible for restorative justice. We have not come through with that, and we've had community members, the Black Parallel School Board and the Sacramento City Teachers Association come forward to us with plans. I think it is time that we really push forward on that and do what we need to do. It's a system, program, and a plan that works.
Thank you, Board Member Cochran. Our final board member comment is from Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. So I just want to remind everyone that we're working on an expired contract. And so if we're going to take this vote, can we have a clear understanding of when it will come back to us? And a timeline
Yes.
that the district will be working with the police department?
So we can certainly do that. Superintendent Aguilar assures me that he and his data team are also working on metrics that we would be able to look at as potential for inclusion in the revised contract. I would like to suggest that we might want to incorporate this topic into a learning session, even if it's only one of our 2-hour learning sessions that we do as a board, to ensure that in fact we give this the time and attention that it should be paid.
Okay.
Okay.
It still doesn't give me like a
So
timeline.
you want a date that this comes back to. So we can look at the calendar. We could bring this back before the board. I would say the next board meeting does not make sense. I don't think we would be that would be possible. I think the earliest we could bring it back to the board would be at the November 15th board meeting.
Okay. Yeah, is that putting us at
I'm
risk?
looking to legal counsel. Can you please share?
I don't know what has been done in the interim. Usually contracts continue if services continue.
You know, in talking to legal counsel for the city, they're very worried about us being out of contract, specifically stating that when we're out of contract, you're giving my SROs no direction because they're not under your contract. So the fact that we've been out of contract for 5 months is very concerning to our legal counsel, and waiting 6, 8, 12 more weeks makes absolutely no sense. So I understand that the urgency to push it out, but it's been pushed out as your partner. We've been your partner for 20 years, and we've been a good partner in standing, and we're 5 months out of contract is really an unfair thing that you've served us, and now you want to push us out even longer. And I don't know that's what's best for the kids or the citizens or the police officers to put them in that position to operate on your campuses without a contract.
So I will say this is the first time we as a board, in having this item come before us, were made aware that we were out of contract with the period of time that you've shared. I appreciate the sentiments that you're offering, but I would hope in good faith, in the spirit that the board is saying, we're committed to coming back with a better contract, a contract that in fact both meets your needs and the needs of our students, that looking at a maximum push-out date of 4 weeks would not be an undue burden.
Well, certainly something that I will run past the chief, and obviously we want to do what's best for the community and the children. It's just something that's very important to note on your part, that there are legal considerations for both your part of the partnership and our part of the partnership while we're operating out of contract.
Thank you. I'm also committed to having a conversation with Chief Hahn. I'm happy to do that. I'll get on the phone with him tomorrow. So with that, I believe we have a motion and a second. So I'm talking about the what do I need to call it?
The second motion.
The second motion, which in fact will replace the first motion made. And I do want to call for a student preferential vote.
Can we clarify what the second motion was?
The second motion is that we will be pulling the action item to approve the contract as written from tonight's agenda with the intent of working through additional contract language that specifically addresses the issues of data and transparency, as well as training, between now and the November 15th board meeting, at which point we will vote on that revised contract.
I understand the importance of functioning under contract, and I also understand the importance of coming back, so I abstain.
Board Member Pritchett?
I just had a question. Would it not do us good to pass the contract since we are in an expired contract and then promise to come up with an MOU over the next month or 2 months with the Sacramento Police Department?
An MOU is a contract.
But it could be an addendum to the contract, correct?
You can always do an addendum, but I don't think that's the motion on the floor in the second.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Right. No. You could, under the Brown Act with this contract, if it's up to the board, could do a limited extension, but that's not what the motion in the second is before the board. And that will take 4 affirmative votes on the second motion.
So what I will say is after we speak with Chief Hahn and we get clarification on the legality and potential challenges of the contract being delayed over the course of the next 4 weeks, should we need to, I am happy to call a special board meeting in which we would take this item up. I personally don't feel comfortable voting on this contract tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and ask for a vote on the motion that I have made. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Abstain? We have a student abstention. The motion passes. Thank you. Item 9.3, Budget Reduction Timeline Plan.
Well, good evening, President Ryan, board members, Superintendent Aguilar. I'm here to give you a budget update, 2018-19, of where we're at. The presentation sequence will be first going to discuss with you FCMAT and the fiscal health analysis process we just went through. We'll be looking at a timeline, a temporary timeline that we started putting together. And lastly, an explanation of budget review committee and that versus waiving a budget review committee. So in terms of fiscal health, FCMAT, they were here. They came to start on work, started Monday. Their work ended Wednesday. They went through a series of 20 areas asking questions about our Sacramento City Unified. They interviewed the superintendent, all the cabinet members, all the heads of departments, including folks like HR, facilities, transportation, payroll, financial services. Their focus is to look at common indicators for the risk of insolvency. So they weren't here specifically for reductions or to eliminate the deficit. It's more about looking at us as an organizational structure and doing a system analysis of us. They look at things like cash management, charter schools, deficit spending, employee benefits, enrollment and attendance, information systems and data management, leadership stability, position control. They will be putting together this report and giving us what they found in December. I would like to, as I start on the timeline, kind of bring the board, do a little history. When we received the letter from SCOE disapproving the budget that was August 22nd. I came on board August 27th and had the pleasure of having a great team. I want to recognize them now. That's Miss Gloria Chung and Mari Watkins. We've been tirelessly working on our disapproval plan. And if we look at that, if you can recall, the superintendent was very clear. The first step was to ensure an accurate budget. Second step was to make sure we had a good target number. It took us 5 weeks to get there. We were appointed a fiscal advisor, so we got our target number. So what goes on from there? Well, we brought back our board took to the board a budget. We knew it was going to be disapproved because that was about making sure our number was accurate. So on October 12th, we posted that our disapproval letter, so the community was aware of that. On October 15th, we started the fiscal health analysis. Tonight, we're asking the board to take action on whether we have a budget review committee or waive the budget review committee. The deadline for the district to submit a cash flow projection based on the last budget is tomorrow. So what happens from there on? So if the board waives the budget review committee, we will continue to work for the next 6 weeks with the fiscal advisor and labor partners to meet the first interim report and balanced budget deadline. If the board does not waive and goes with the budget review committee, we will go through that step, and we get from the superintendent of public instruction a list, which actually doesn't exist. We choose 3 names from that list, and within 5 days we start the BRC process, and they complete a budget report by November 30th. On our budget first interim report, this will be December 6th. We're working towards submitting a balanced budget, and when that is submitted, it meets our deadline to SCOE of having a budget to them by December 14th. And that is why December 14th is our first interim budget and balanced budget deadline. From there, SCOE has a deadline of December 31st to get that to the California Department of Education. One of the things that I like to bring out that is important is from October 19th to 12/6, our team will be working on that third step. And what that is looking for viable options to mitigate our structural deficit. So the superintendent was very clear in his charge to us. We are first to look at savings that don't require negotiations. So we have been painlessly looking at a lot of options, flowing them on a paper, trying to get what those numbers are. Our savings with negotiations. So we're starting to accumulate that data, put that on a chart, and lastly is to look at cuts, reductions, furloughs, things of that. We want to go through those first 2 steps. So as we continue to compile that data in the next 6 weeks, we're going to bring those to the superintendent, and those will be prioritized, and that's what we'll be looking to bring back to the board on December 6th. This way you're aware of the process that we are going through. On to the Budget Review Committee versus the waiver of the Budget Review Committee. With the budget disapproved, the county superintendent must call for the formation of a Budget Review Committee. That is unless you, the board, decides to waive that, agree to waive that requirement. The waiver must be approved by the district, by you, the board, and submitted to the county superintendent for approval. The California Department of Education must approve that waiver, and we have till November 8th to get that to the California Department of Education. Looking at the pros and cons of a budget review committee, the pro is it's one of the 2 options that the board can consider. The con, It's not common practice. The California Department of Education currently does not have a list for the board to choose from. They would have to call out, which introduces time. Budget Review Committee would then have a very short window to look at our budget and give it a thorough brushing, as I would call it. Lastly, EDCO does not require that we have access to our fiscal advisor. So currently we're working with the fiscal advisor. If you recall, we got accurate budget, got a target number. Moving forward, SCOE we don't get that luxury. The waiver of the budget, the pro is it's common practice. When I call out to my fellow colleagues at FCMAT, talk with SCOE, Michelle at FCMAT, this was the common practice. So that is the pro. It also allows us to capitalize, allows the district to continue working with SCOE, their appointed fiscal advisor, in order to meet the December 14th deadline for our first interim budget and bring you back a balanced budget. Also allowed us to continue working with our labor management consortium and other labor partners and work toward meeting that deadline. Cons, talking to my colleagues, we couldn't come up with a con. Like I said, it's the industry standard for us at CBOs, and so like I said, we couldn't come up with a con in itself. Moving forward, so our recommendation to you to please consider to approve the waiver of the Budget Review Committee.
Do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, we have one public comment from Cecile Nunley.
Okay. Good evening again. Last time, I promise. Only two questions. The first is, this is listed as an information item. However, later on, it's on the consent agenda. And that was just a little confusing to me. Why would this not be an action item right here as opposed to being on the consent? The other thing it mentioned in the presentation that there's the labor consortium and then other labor partner. Is there a reason why all of the labor partners wouldn't be together? It seems like that would be more reasonable and more efficient. So just those two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. We have no other public comments? Do we have board member comments or questions? We have a comment from Board Member Cochran.
Thank you. Thank you. So this process is a bit unnerving. It's so important that we address this problem. And when I found out that we were going to waive the CEDE, I was a little bit nervous, but I've been told by the CBO, the process that he's going to take has been shown here. I was told that we're going to really work at this and get this budget balanced. So I'm going to personally instill my faith that this will happen. We have to meet these deadlines. We have to get this budget balanced. And it is incumbent on staff and the board and leadership, all of us working together to make sure we get this done. So I urge staff that is working on this problem to reach out to the board, anything that we can do to help you, any investigation on finances, I encourage you to speak up. I know that there are community partners that look at the budget, and I know that you bring an expertise, Mr. Quinto, that we sorely need. And so I'm being very positive, and I'm looking forward to the best, because in the last couple of weeks, we've heard some very terrible things about our district regarding the budget, and they're true. We've got to get this, we've got to get our act together on this. But we are an excellent district in many ways. We serve many children, we provide programs, and we are instituting change based on the superintendent's wonderful, clear, effective ideas. ideas, but we can't do anything unless we get our fiscal house in order. And as huge and onerous as that job is, Mr. Quinto, it's falling on your shoulders, but I'm going to tell you right now that I have confidence that you can do it, and I'm looking forward to the next meeting and the next until we have resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cochran.
Thank you, Board Member Cochran. Do we have other comments? Board Member Hanson.
Oh, is that on? Okay, there we go. One, I just want to remind all of us that even in spite of the budget challenges we have a lot of money. Our total budget is almost $550 million. That's a lot of money. So we can't lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of resources that are there that maybe we just haven't been deploying them in the best way for the greatest good for our students and make a more student-centric budget as opposed to the way that this district has operated for many years. And unfortunately, that falls on the board, on staff, on our leaders, labor leaders. All of us are going to have to be part of that. And, to let Cecile know, it is sad that not all 5 of our labor partners are together, only 4. And one SCTA has boycotted the meetings and refuses to be part of that. You should ask them why they're not doing it, because it's a mystery to me. All of us have to be rowing in the same direction. If we don't, maybe the whole ship sinks. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to do the right thing by our district. We have what it takes to get it done. We've got the right leaders in place. And, it's incumbent on all of us to take care of that business.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Do we have any other comments from board members? I want to thank you, Dr. Quinto, and your team for your due diligence and hard work over the past few weeks. I know that you stepped into this role perhaps not understanding in full the magnitude of the task that would be before you, but just as the superintendent has said, he might not have created this issue, but this is his challenge to confront. We believe the same of you. You might not have created this budget challenge, but it is your challenge as it is ours to confront, and I have full confidence that you can do that. As we talk about the labor consortium and the spirit of shared sacrifice, I have to continue to hope that all of our bargaining partners can come to the table to develop a path forward. I have said it before and I will say it again, we cannot afford to fail. As I've been out in the community talking with students and parents, they have asked me if we believe that we are going to come to a resolution. And I have told them with unwavering conviction that we will come to a resolution that is student-centered. I also know that as I've talked with individuals like our custodians at a school site just a couple days ago, that custodian shared with me that he was in the process of also getting his truck driver's license because he still remembers the layoffs of years past before I was a board member, before many of us sat at this table when cuts decimated our custodial staff. I am fully committed, as I hope my board member colleagues are, to ensuring that the savings we find are not borne on the backs of any one entity, that in fact that there is shared sacrifice and that at the end of every decision, students are what we have used as our barometer of success. So thank you, and I don't think we have any other comments on this item. This is an information item only, item 9.4, volunteer manual and business process update.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. I'm Vincent Harris, Chief of the Continuous Improvement and Accountability Office, and I'm joined by several members of other department teams, including our Chief of Human Resources, Kansi McGarn, our Leader of Family and Community Empowerment, Sean Alexander, Monica Garland from our Human Resources team, and Doug Husher, who oversees our athletics program. We're excited tonight to give you an update on our volunteer business process and to let you know that we are in work of hopefully launching it the first of this next calendar year, January of 2019. What's really important about this presentation is that in some respects, it really highlights the equity, access, and social justice guiding principle in the context of adult relationships with students. And so really the themes that we're trying to represent in our revision to the volunteer process is the notion of safe access. Because we know that our volunteers care deeply about our students, care deeply about our community, but we also know that safety really matters a great deal. One thing that the board itself took action on was creating meaningful ways to mitigate some of the cost of fingerprinting, which we know is an important barrier to volunteerism, but we also recognize that we had to wrestle with ways of doing that so that we can include as many of our families as possible. And you'll actually see within our presentation itself, we actually wrestled with this notion of how to include as many of our diverse families as possible. And so we tried to be as overarching in our definition of a volunteer, and you'll also see this new term called visitor as well, with the goal being is how do we increase the greatest access for families to our students, knowing that our families come from very different perspectives, very different circumstances, and we want to be as inclusive as possible. And so as much as we talk about the equity, access, and social justice guiding principle as it relates to student outcomes, it is equally important within this presentation this evening. So we had concerns with the current volunteer process. Many of those concerns, board members yourselves surfaced in many settings in terms of the notion of the kind of confusing set of levels that we had, this notion of inability to really track the data with fidelity within our technology systems, no real consistency in this notion of how do you know you have a volunteer on campus, and in an overarching sense, and this has been one of the themes that we've talked about in several presentations, the power of a standard work process to make it clear what does it mean to go through the volunteer vetting process and make sure that it is consistent throughout the district. And ultimately, this resulted in a charge that we received from the board, particularly Member Pritchett, speaking to us in January of this year around the importance to the superintendent about coming back to the board with a defined process to manage our volunteers and coaches. And so tonight, we're giving you a sense of the work in process. One of the kind of the big lessons learned for us, as with any complex or wicked challenge, it's much more difficult than we initially realized in terms of resolving it, but we are working on resolving it, and you'll hear our progress this evening. This led us to create a cross-departmental team, and you'll see here several departments listed, representatives of which are behind me. I also forgot to include one department on this slide, our technology team, because we know that in going to scale, we really do need to leverage our district systems, those being Escape and Infinite Campus. So with that oversight, I do want to make sure I verbally call out the importance of our technology partners in bringing this business process for our volunteers to life. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Sean Alexander, and she'll take you through some of the benchmarking work that she's led to make sure that we adopted best practices both here in California and from other districts throughout the nation.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Ryan and members of the board and Superintendent Aguilar and everyone who's out here in our audience. I'm Sean Alexander, and as we continued our journey with this, we did a reach out to not only our neighboring districts, but we did a reach out to our family engagement partners nationwide who have similar demographics to see what their volunteer processes look like. And what we found is that the list that we have in front of you, all of them, as a best practice, have fingerprinting for all volunteers. We looked then into our neighboring school districts and how they fund that. And if you'll see the list we have here, the majority of them have the district covering fees for fingerprinting. In looking at best practices both locally and nationally, we adopted fingerprinting for all, TB clearance, clear expectation for our volunteers through orientation, a standardized sign-in process, and wearing a standardized identification at all times for our volunteers. And key elements of our revised process include a formal business process, which we have never had before, integration with Escape and Infinite Campus, and systematic input of data about volunteers district-wide so we can pull reports and track our volunteers, distinction between volunteer and visitor, fingerprinting of all volunteers, establishing a weighted allocation for our subsidized fingerprint costs rather than a first-come, first-serve, and an ongoing monitoring process for volunteer. This is our volunteer procedure that is going on right now. It's in a draft form, and it's big. And, but we are using this not only to kind of give us a roadmap going forward and for our staff at school sites to have a consistent map going forward, but also to really recognize some gaps in accountability so that we could address those in our design process. Now, here's where we spent a lot of discussion and time, the differentiation between volunteer versus visitor. And if you'll look, volunteers we've identified and proposed to be a parent, guardian, or a community member who assists at a school site or in a program on a regular basis, and that would be 10 or more days during a school year. If you were to volunteer, you must complete the application. You would need to undergo the fingerprint process. You would need to show a TB clear or a TB test clear. You would need to have receive an orientation, and you would need to sign in and wear identification on campus at all times. Some of the duties of a volunteer include coaching, short-term supervision of our students, one-on-one tutoring or mentoring, any chaperones, transporting students, and someone who is a regular assistant in a classroom. And because we wanted to be very inclusive of some of our parents who do not have the ability to volunteer, we established a distinction of visitor. And a visitor is a parent guardian who visits the school site on an intermittent basis. So that's no more than 10 days out of the 180 a school year. And also, they're required to sign in and wear a sticker identifying them on campus. That way, volunteers with a lanyard, staff knows who's a volunteer on campus, sticker, we know you're a visitor. Examples of visitor activities include attending school events, presenting at a career day, or reading during a reading event at school, participating in a school garden day, and this is actually the one that I think is going to be very important to a lot of the parents that we've been working with. The ability to attend a day field trip, not as a chaperone and not supervising students. And the reason this speaks to me is oftentimes our parents struggle with that and they want to be participatory in these events. And the prior process, they had to have a volunteer status. And this way, some of our most disenfranchised parents will be able to engage in those activities with their families, which are so enriching. The cost of the model that we're looking at, those identifying badges, I searched several different printers nationally, and the lowest bid I could come in with was $300 per 1,000. Lanyards, $286 per 1,000. So those are identifiers for school. The sticker badges we use now, and Office Depot, they're $549 for 100. The fingerprint costs, the district's been very, very generous in an allocation of a subsidized fingerprint fee based on an equity framework of $25,000. What folks may not know is the current fingerprint fee for folks who may not have the need for subsidy is only $47. The actual cost to the district is $84, and the district has been absorbing that cost. And now Mr. Harris is going to talk a little bit about how the formula for fee assistance was developed.
Thanks, Sean. And really the goal here is building on the board's feedback, as we heard in June, your thoughts around when you approved the $25,000, making sure we took an equity thought mindset and how we allocated it to sites. And so, as Sean mentioned, we took the opportunity to say, what is something that is better than first come, first serve. And so we really thought about sites in terms of free and reduced lunch rate. And so we use that as an allocation table. So sites, obviously with a higher free and reduced lunch rate, would have more of the free fingerprinting opportunities than sites with a lower free and reduced lunch rate. And that was basically our basic methodology. We recognize that there are many ways to think about this, and so we're continuing to wrestle with the methodology going forward, but we definitely see this methodology as an improvement over the prior framework of first come, first serve. And then as we talked about building an accountability framework, this is still very formative as well. But what's important about this slide is recognizing the cross-department nature of this work. And so what you see here framed are roles and responsibilities across very important units. So from the site level, of course, obviously is where many of our volunteer experiences begin. But the key role our human resources team plays in the validation process, and then the important roles then that come into play with our FACE office, and then from an oversight perspective, we've designed some elements of our continuous improvement and accountability office also playing a role in terms of making sure as a system that when someone's name is entered as a volunteer, we have the ability to track them both at their current site and then potentially if they move throughout the system, because we know there's sometimes mobility with our volunteers. And so really the accountability framework that's emerging and still we're crafting is wrapped around this notion of how do we monitor effectively and then make sure we stay on track or keep track of volunteers in terms of where they may go in the system. This slide is really important because as we've evolved in our journey, we've realized the importance of getting feedback from a variety of stakeholders because volunteers do touch the system in many ways. I'm going to ask Doug now to share a little bit about the perspectives we got from some of our athletic directors and their experience reviewing our revised process.
Good evening. Greg Purcell, the district's athletic director, could not be here, so I'm reporting on his behalf. Mr. Purcell worked closely with the committee and beyond the committee, had multiple meetings were held with the district's high school athletic directors to hear their feedback. So one area that the new policy addresses is when volunteers help support our athletics teams. With the new policy, after a day of helping out, that person would be a volunteer, no longer a visitor, and be required to be fingerprinted and cleared by DOJ and FBI. For those spending just a day assisting the team, they would need to be directly supervised by a certificated employee. Athletic directors met with Monica Garland from Human Resources to talk about streamlining the process so there's efficient communication. That communication needs to be close between Human Resources, providing the list of cleared volunteers to office managers, and then office managers in turn providing those lists to coaches. Athletic directors also met with Sean Alexander from Family Engagement and Keyshawn Marshall from Risk Management to make sure the processes were clear and thoughtful. Part of the meeting with Keyshawn Marshall also included revisiting processes to ensure that all coaches are CPR trained. This was a collaborative process involving multiple departments to ensure that the volunteer processes are implemented effectively between all of these departments.
And really, we're excited too about the engagement of all of our labor partners, as you'll see them listed here on this slide, and then obviously many central office teams as well. And we do have actually several other groups we're reaching out to as well. The goal here really is recognizing the power of volunteers and how they touch so many parts of the district, both in terms of site relationships with students, but also many of our internal teams as well. And so we really do want a volunteer process that is inclusive and takes into account the points of view of a variety of stakeholders. So as I mentioned, tonight is an update, and so there are some outstanding items that we're still working on over the next 3 months in preparation for the January 2019 launch. Most importantly, in terms of seeing the system, we know the technology piece is really important, and so we're working through the best ways, working with our technology leader and his team about leveraging Escape and Infinite Campus appropriately to track volunteers within our system as adults. We're working on the professional learning plan. You've heard elements of this in terms of reaching out to key stakeholders who utilize volunteers. And so we're working on a professional learning plan to make sure everybody understands this process so we can implement fidelity. And then as we've done the work, and this is part of the challenge of the timing, there's so many volunteers that our initial thought was really focusing on the in-school volunteers during the school day, but we realized there's actually a strength of volunteers in our community during after school as well. And so we're looking to integrate the after-school process with the process we've been focused on most exclusively during the school day, and we know that we need a couple of months to do that as well to make sure we operate with fidelity. And then finally, we have been wrestling with the timeline of implementation, making sure that, does it make sense to just launch fully across the system day one with a scaled rollout, or do we think about a staggered kind of rollout that might be regionally done? We're just trying to think through in terms of fidelity, because there is the notion of making sure several stakeholders understand what we're doing. We want to be thoughtful about it, and also make sure we do it in a way that we ensure success at the beginning. And with that, I'll turn it over back to the board for questions.
Looks like Mr.
No public
Dario
comment.
stepped away. Do we have any public comments?
There are none. Board
There are
President.
none. Okay, do we have any comments from board members on this item? We do. We have comments from Board Member Pritchett, followed by Board Member Cochran, followed by Board Member Minnick.
Thank you, President Ryan, and thank you to staff for this presentation. And it's been long waited, and I have a few questions. I appreciate the in-depth of like the difference between volunteer and, hold on, I'm trying to find the page, volunteer and visitor. And so my question is, can you just walk us through of what like you foresee at a school site and how this will take place? I'm just trying to visualize, because I mean, I could think of like at an elementary school, per se. There's many open gates. There's areas of point of entrance that many people can walk into. Have you guys thought about that at all? And how we're going to stop people from walking in?
Well, the best practice would be sign in for anyone who comes on campus. That's a security issue, and I know that schools struggle with that. But the intention is anyone coming on campus there would be sort of a standardized sign in, because schools are doing a great job of trying to capture that, but it's a little willy-nilly.
Yeah.
So we would want to have some practices that were like, here's your volunteer sign-in packet, here's your visitor sign-in packet, so that our office managers, and Monica and I are going to be, Monica, get up here. Monica and I are going to be training the office managers and walking them through this in November at their meeting, so that we've already presented to them, but we wanted to sort of keep them abreast of what's going on, because they really are the points of contact, that front office staff. So a volunteer would come in, a volunteer would sign in the volunteer log, a volunteer would get their identifying lanyard, go to the site that they're supposed to be on campus. A visitor would come in, show ID, get a sticker, so that everybody on campus, if you don't have one or the other and you're not staff,
Yeah.
we need to know who you are.
So I've been on, the reason why I asked the question is because I've been on school sites where it wasn't any ill meaning of a person being on campus. It was just that they didn't know. So my thing is signage, signage, signage. It should not just be at a front point, like next to an office that you must sign in. It should be throughout the school, because people will enter in at different points, and as we know and how that we've seen. So signage is going to be important. What about a communication plan to roll this out to the principals, so in regard to the coaching? I know I've spoke to a few of you regarding coaching, which is why we have this presentation, I think. And there has been situations where there'll be a guest coach, or somebody that just is a friend of so-and-so that came in, but they didn't go through the whole application process, and they're out coaching kids on our fields.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That has been a slippery slope, and it is easy for one day to become 2 days, to become 5 days, et cetera. You're exactly right. That is why we highlighted there after a day. Really, it's once a month is what the policy talks about. But of course, if you're coaching, it would be multiple days in a row. So after a day, you can't be there unless now you've gone through the volunteer process and you've been cleared. our biggest point of contact with schools is really through principals and through the athletic directors, mainly through the athletic directors. And so Mr. Purcell meets with those athletic directors now once a month. At most of those meetings, or many of those meetings, Ms. Garland is there as well. They've spent a lot of time probing into that conversation about how do we make sure kids are safe, how do we make sure everyone has appropriate clearances to be working with our kids.
So prior to Mr. Purcell's hire on to being the athletic director, was there somebody in that place that was meeting regularly with our athletic directors?
Yes, Mr. Smith was in that position, but the contact was not as frequent as we have now.
Okay, so once again, communication, signage, I think that's important, and I'm more than happy to sit down with staff and, go over ideas. I'm definitely, you guys are the pros. I just know things from being out in the community, so thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, appreciate your thoughts.
Member Cochran?
Thank you. Thank you. Is my mic on? There we go. Thank you. This is a long time coming, very much appreciated. There are so many people in the community who want to volunteer, and it's been a little bit puzzling at times. So page 9, is this an internal document? Because I'm hoping that this is not a public document. Internal?
Definitely internal. Okay. I mean, this is our way of making meaning internally about all the parts of the volunteer experience, but definitely this would not have any kind of public facing.
Okay, so just, Mr. Harris, just walk me through briefly. I want to volunteer. I come on campus. I can get my prints. But do I have a piece of information of the steps that I definitely need to take? If I come in, will I be handed something and told this is what you have to do?
Hi, my name is Monica Garland, and good evening. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't typically speak at these things, but yes. So when a volunteer comes on campus, the first point of contact should be the office. That's where they should be going to sign in. They should receive a volunteer application, which is a full packet of information for them and for the site. Emergency contact for the person that's there, what they would like to do, what they're comfortable with, emergency information, the pertinent address for that person that's there, all the information that we need to help facilitate the volunteer process.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate that. Is there an age requirement if someone's under 18 and does have a shortened school day or can volunteer? Is that possible?
So if you are under 18, I guess that's a twofold. If you're a student of ours, I would think that we would need to get like parent permission. A parent permission slip that says, and we've talked about that at the office manager meeting because we have some mentor kids that want to come on campus, and we ask for the parent permission so that we know that that's okay for them to do that. Principal signs off and approves that.
Do you give the kids fingerprints?
Under 18, no, we do not.
Okay.
Youth development. We are working with youth development, though, for a group of students that want to help and mentor, like high school student want to mentor elementary kids.
I really appreciate this work again. I want to thank you very much.
I just want to say I really appreciate you addressing this. I remember my experience when my kids were in elementary school. As a chair of the site council, we talked a lot about, what if people want to just help out, but they can't afford the fingerprints, and we couldn't afford the fingerprints for them. Much of what I see laid out under the visitor description is already happening on school sites, but to have it very clear for them is I really appreciate, because I think there's a lot of folks that just want to go on a field trip, but they don't necessarily need to go through the process to be able to be left, transport kids and all these other things. And so laying it out that, you still can participate in your kids' education in these kind of other ways. My only question then, I guess, is it references in visitors things about like attending a school event and stuff. I want to clarify that this does not include school events that are open to the public. So like, we have, parents who are coming to, football games, basketball games, all those kind of things. Sometimes those things happen within the school day or like at the tail end or like a sixth period or something. How is that addressed in terms of like, and I don't even know how it's addressed now if someone comes on to campus, if it's something within the course of the school day as a visitor.
For things like that, the Harvest Festival, you know, those big events, it would be a little unwieldy to try to have everybody sticker in. But, you know, those are under constant supervision of staff. We're talking about when we kind of go to the visitor, the parent that might want to come into the classroom a few times, the parent who might want to have lunch with their student. So that, you know, those distinctions, we'll have to hone down. I recognize this isn't perfect. And as we're putting together more specific information for our procedures for our volunteers and visitors so that they know where they fall, we'll include those as well.
No, I appreciate that. And I really, and I know this is not the correct time to be talking about spending more money, but I do appreciate anything we do in terms of supporting parents in the cost of the fingerprinting. And I noticed on the slide that Elk Grove and a few others are paying for everything. And I'd be curious into maybe looking into whether there are other funding opportunities to pay for that in terms of parent engagement organizations. There's some, you know, national parent engagement kind of organizations. I don't know if they have grants. I can kind of search around too and see. But it would be amazing if we could provide that to all our families instead of you know, having to limit it to the dollar amount that we have. So, are there any other questions from the board? All right, well, thank you very much. Which moves us on, let's see, where are we? 9.5, Suicide Prevention Board Policy. Coming forward is Victoria Flores.
This slide. Good evening, Vice President Minnick, Superintendent Aguilar, and members of the board. My name is Victoria Flores, and I serve as the Director of Student Support and Health Services. And here with me tonight is Jacqueline Rodriguez, who's a coordinator too, also in the same department. And we are here tonight to talk with you about a revision to the Suicide Prevention Board Policy. So, as you may be aware, suicide is the second leading cause of death for our young people ages 10 to 24. And in Sacramento County alone, over 20% of our high school students report seriously considering suicide, which is much higher than our national average. And we know that knowing the warning signs for suicide and how to get help can really help save lives. And so our staff that are out there in our schools serving on the front line really, you know, are able to notice those warning signs and know how to refer our students for help. So that leads us to the passage of AB 2246 that requires all districts to adopt a policy on student suicide prevention that specifically addresses the needs of also high-risk groups. So our department convened a task force. We met about 7 times in the spring and summer of 2017. And this task force was really pretty comprehensive. We had district and school site staff. We had community-based agencies like our mental health partners, agencies that serve our LGBTQ youth and our homeless, our youth experiencing homelessness, legal services of California, law enforcement, parents, students. We were a very inclusive group. And this group of individuals worked on the California Department of Education model policy, which was really inclusive of current research and best practices in suicide prevention. It's extremely comprehensive. And we literally went line by line and made sure it fit the needs of Sacramento City Unified School District. And this policy potentially is, intentionally is designed to identify those at risk of suicide, increase those help-seeking behaviors, and of course decrease suicide risk and suicidal behaviors. This policy aligns with our district LCAP goals of safe, emotionally healthy, and engaged students, as well as family and community engagement. The board policy says that the district will establish and maintain a suicide awareness and prevention training and education for district and school staff, students in 7th through 12th grade, and parents and caregivers. And this policy does include our current district procedures for suicide risk assessment, intervention, and postvention. So, and I wanted to point out to you that for over 10 years, and I did a little research, and I think it's actually much longer, we've been utilizing a standard process for suicide risk assessment and intervention. And our district employed mental health professionals receive training on using a standard risk assessment tool every year. And for the past 4 years, we've been providing suicide prevention training to staff, parents, community members, SROs that you heard tonight, and students using Youth Mental Health First Aid, which is a comprehensive evidence-based curriculum. It's 8 hours, so it's pretty intensive. And then we've also recently added on an evidence-based curriculum called Question, Persuade, and Respond. And Jacqueline's actually one of those trained presenters. It's a 1-hour training, so much more doable for people very focused on suicide prevention. I'm really proud to say that we are the recipients of another SAMHSA grant that will allow us to go ahead and be able to cover the cost of training our staff and our parents. We also receive funding from Kaiser, our local community benefits. Oh, she was in the room. I think she went home. And SCOE. So we're going to be able to cover some of these costs that will be to the district. So our next steps, we're going to continue what we do and what we've been doing really well for a while, continuing to train our district employed mental health professionals, implementing our risk assessment procedures with our school sites, and then continuing to work with human resources and the academic office on what our training implementation plan will be to really broaden these awareness efforts and bring this really critical education to our students and our staff. So we respectfully ask for you to adopt the revised suicide prevention board policy on our next meeting. This is just the first reading, and we'd be happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Board Member Minnick and Board Member Cochran, do you have comments, or is that from the last item?
Then I had to change seats.
Do we have any public comment on this item? No?
No public comment.
Do we have any board member comment? Looks like we don't. This was heard in policy committee, so obviously we had a rich conversation there. I do want to thank you, Ms. Flores, for all of your hard work. I appreciate the grant funding you consistently bring in to try and deliver high-quality services for our students. I don't think we should be relying on that grant funding. I think that these are exactly the types of programs and supports that we should be creating those guardrails around. And I do just want to thank you. You personally, I think, are one of the hardest working staff members. We're so lucky to have you in the district, and I'm looking forward to having this policy come back at the next board meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Item 10.0, consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Student preferential vote.
I vote yes on all open session items.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Where are we now? Thank you. Moving on to item 11.0, business and financial information, receive information. Do we have 11.2's monthly suspension report that's now being included?
Yes.
Great. Item 12.0, future board meeting dates and locations. Our next board meeting will be held on November 1st, regular board meeting at 4:30 p.m. at the Cerna Center. As you know, we had a bit of work being done this time. Item 13.0, adjournment. Before we adjourn, I want to thank Rosemont and everyone who made tonight possible. I know it's not easy to move a board meeting to a school site, but I hope that we'll make this a more regular practice. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to get out on campuses and hopefully engage some new individuals in our board meetings. With that, I'll entertain a motion. Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.